So the rum cake is because my wife made it.
I had some that was good.
Kudos on that too.
Yeah.
Let the record reflect that it's good. You can taste the rum.
The Committee on Homeland Security and Public Safety will now come to order. The clerk will please call the roll.
Chairman King,
Here.
Vice Chair Navarez,
Here.
Representative Schaefer,
Here.
Metcalf, Burns, Ray, Johnson, Holland, Hinojosa.
Great. Quorum is present. And I know a lot of you, ladies and gentlemen, I know a lot of you were here at 8 o'clock this morning, and we were unable to begin laying out the bills. We had some committee work to work through, and then we knew we had to break for the floor about 9 o'clock. And the bill authors did not want to get halfway through the laying out of their bill and then have to start over or anything like that. So, but anyway, this morning I kind of talked about some ground rules, kind of how we're going to try to work through the day because we've got such a big crowd. And since a lot of you weren't here this morning, and I know we have people in an overflow room in room E2030, that if you don't mind, I'd like to run over those again. And for those of you who've already heard them, I apologize for going through it a second time. We've got well over 100 people registered to testify so far between the two bills, and that can take quite a bit of time. So what we want to do, and the room is going to be full and probably get fuller, and sometimes people need to get up and stand around the back or stretch a little bit. So what I want to encourage everybody to do, and I know it's a very important issue for everyone who's here, including all the committee, but really want to encourage everybody to kind of do your best today to treat other people the way that you want to be treated while you're here, showing the utmost respect and courtesy. And not that you wouldn't normally do that, but sometimes we've got people of different positions, and when it gets late and we're still here at midnight or whatever, sometimes it's kind of hard to, hold things in check. So we'll be calling people up in groups of 3 to testify. And so, for example, if I was calling up 3 right now, I would also name the next 3 so that you'll be ready. And if you know someone who's in that next 3 and maybe they've stepped out to go to the restroom or something, maybe if you could go ahead and let them know so we can go ahead and kind of try to keep that flowing as well as we can. We're going to try to limit testimony to 2 minutes a witness. If there's a little machine up here, and when you see it get to yellow, you've got 30 seconds left. Now, we got a little room there, so nobody's going to hit a gong or something if you go just a few seconds over. But try to adhere to that as much as you can. And if we start asking you questions, which I know will happen a lot, that doesn't count against your time, so don't worry about that. That's on us. So if we start asking questions, feel free to take time answering those. Along that line of treating other people the way that you want to be treated, we've got issues with cameras and photographs and all that, and it's a very important thing getting to come down here, and a lot of people kind of like to memorialize that. But one thing we've had some difficulty with in the past is someone will be sitting in a chair and holding up an iPhone or an iPad and recording something, or maybe even streaming live, something like that. And the people behind them are trying to look around, or the people beside them, if they're trying to talk into it, can't hear, and it disturbs them a little. And so what I'm going to ask you is if you are doing taking a picture or doing some video or something like that, we'll try to let everybody do that as long as it doesn't get to where it interferes with people being able to hear and see and all of that. And I would ask that you please try to go to the back or kind of stand along the side somewhere or something like that, so that there aren't people around you in whose way you might be as you're trying to hold up. And again, if you're right, and also if you would, there's a little area back there that is for people with disabilities that may need wheelchair accessibility or something like that. Be aware of that. If nobody needs it, it's also a great place for someone with a baby, so that works okay as long as there's not somebody else that needs it. So be a little attentive to that. If it starts crowding up at the back and you're back there videoing and kind of taking up too much space at some point, I might have to ask you know, you to try to figure a way to work that out. But I know that y'all are so super capable of figuring that out yourself. So my ask is that everybody kind of work together if you're in the back. If somebody's in your way, just please gently ask them, and we can intervene if we have to, but I just don't really think that's going to be necessary. Am I leaving anything out, members? We got it? Okay, we kind of good to go. I've also told the authors of the bill that they're welcome to sit up here so they can kind of see what's going on rather than traditionally sitting outside when they're doing it. Now, initially, I'm going to call up 2 people instead of 3. I'm going to call up, obviously, Representative Stickland, and then he had someone that he had requested as an expert witness. All right, and the chair recognizes that Representative Hinojosa and Ray are with us as well, and Representative Burns. Who did you want, Jonathan?
I got
Dudley Brown.
Dudley Brown. Mr. Brown, can you come on up? Okay.
Brandon Pierce.
Okay, whoever it is you want to come. Who's the other one? I'm sorry.
Bradley right here.
Bradley?
Yes.
Okay, would you come up, sit up here? Now, the other rule is when you do come up to testify, even if I've called your name, I know it sounds kind of silly and redundant, but for the record, and by the way, everything is live streamed here and is automatically videotaped. The camera's right back there. So if you want, there's really not a need to videotape anything because it already is, and it's archived. It'll probably be posted sometime tomorrow, and it'll stay up there long past any of us caring anything about it, and anyone in this room. It'll be up there for a long time, and you can always download that. It's public record. You can do what you want with it, so it's there. So don't feel like you've got to record something or something's missed. Again, I want to make a little comment here. The people that are up here taking pictures and stuff, that blocks the people who are behind you from being able to see. And so, you know, be courteous. That's the best answer the best thing I can say to say. But when you do come up to testify, you're going to state your name and whether you're testifying, and if you represent somebody, who it is you represent, a group or something like that, and if you're testifying on, for, or against the bill. And then that's when your 2 minutes will kind of kick off. So there's also, members are going to be getting up and leaving, because including me at one point, because there's other committee hearings going on, and some of them, including me, have to go lay out a bill somewhere. And so they may leave for a while and then come back. Don't think that they're not very, very interested in your issue. It's just that we got 140 days and committees meet at the same time. So when I get up, don't think that's the case either. So Representative Stickland, and do you do anything else? Did we get everything? All right, I think we got everything covered. Oh, also, if there is anyone that flew in and has a plane to catch and it's at a certain hour, if you will let Bird know, the assistant clerk, we'll try to get you up in time so you can get back to the airport if there's anybody that's in that situation. Chair lays out HB 375 and recognizes Representative Stickland to explain his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. This is a big day for many Texans. I want to personally and publicly...
And Jonathan, forgive me, please, for interrupting you. I'm sorry. I'm correct. You don't want the committee substitute laid out. Is that correct?
No, we would like that.
You did get the one you wanted finished?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Chair lays out... Chair offers up committee substitute to HB 375. Is there any objection? Hearing none, Chair recognizes Representative Stickland to explain the committee substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a big day for many Texans, and I want to personally and publicly thank Chairman King for being so open to dialogue, shooting straight with me, and allowing this bill to finally have its day. I also want to thank the members of this committee who have listened to me, asked tough questions, and help us mold this bill into its current form. To those of you who have co-authored or verbally supported our efforts, thank you. This bill means a lot to me because it means so much to my constituents and Texans everywhere. I've yet to see any other bill muster up the level of passion and support that constitutional carry has. I first filed a constitutional carry bill on November 10th, 2014 in the 84th legislative session. After helping gather over 50,000 signed petitions, numerous speaking engagements, debates, and rallies across this state, I joined with thousands of Texans who were devastated to realize their top legislative priority would never have a hearing or have a chance to be voted upon. I have filed only 4 bills this session, fewer than any other representative in the state. This is because House Bill 375 deserves that much attention and effort. I have faced the voters of my district numerous times, and I have promised to do everything within my power to see their Second Amendment rights restored, respected, and protected with this piece of legislation. As a result, they have sent me back to this Capitol, and they expect us to get it done. Gun restrictions and regulations have a dirty past and origin in our state. They were created because certain people did not want others to possess weapons or have the right to defend themselves. The truth is that they were racist in nature and meant to create an unlevel playing field. I reject that train of thought. I prescribe to the idea that every Texan, regardless of their color or income, has the right to bear arms if they so choose. We recently commissioned a poll, members, conducted research, and our findings has told us a lot. Much to our amazement, it turns out criminals, they don't obey the law. Shocking, I know. But they do not seem to care about the rules that we set for them. It turns out that barriers to entry such as fees, required government classes, and tests are often ignored by the ones who we seek to stop. The good, responsible, millions of law-abiding citizens are the ones who have fallen victim to the bright ideas of regulation. It is the single mother of low-income status in a bad part of town who is hurt. She is now walking around unarmed and vulnerable simply because she cannot afford to carry financially, and that is wrong. 11 states are already doing this, and that is more than 20% of the United States. This is no longer groundbreaking legislation. In fact, the state of Vermont, home of Senator Bernie Sanders himself, has always had it. As a result, they hold the title of lowest gun murders per capita in the country. Texans are sick of big government. They are sick of feeling like their rights are always in danger of disappearing, and that is why they continue to vote for officials who campaign as pro-Second Amendment. Sadly, we have not delivered. Despite our state's reputation of being pro-gun, we are consistently ranked poorly by those who look at the facts and not at the TV. They are tired of watching state after state pass constitutional carry. Texas often leads on issues. How about we start doing so in regards to personal liberty? State Republican delegates have made constitutional carry their #1 stated priority. My home county, Tarrant, the GOP Executive Committee has passed multiple resolutions calling on this to become law. There's been an incredible amount of attention on this topic, and as a result, a lot of misinformation exists. I would like to clarify that this bill is not the following. #1, it is not an expansion of who can possess a gun. If you can legally possess it, we believe you should be able to carry it. #2, this is not an expansion of where anyone can carry. All signage still applies. #3, this is not an anti-law enforcement bill. We believe it makes their job easier and our state safer because an armed society is a safer society. #4, this does not get rid of the LTC. It will still exist. This bill simply makes it optional and not mandatory. #5, it will not affect state revenue. States that have already passed it have seen continued growth in sales of the LTC licenses. Our right to defend ourselves should not be negotiable or infringed upon. There is not an acceptable amount we can lower a mandatory fee to. There is no room for compromise. The time for this bill to come to fruition has already passed us by. It is time that we, the politicians in this building, catch up with all of those here today in support of this bill. Let's pass this bill out of committee as soon as possible. It is the right thing to do. It is the constitutional thing to do. And frankly, it is the only thing that those testifying here today in support of will accept. We have many personal testimonies and expert witnesses here with us today who will be speaking on specific aspects of this bill and the impact it has on Texas. We also have Bradley Pierce with us, who is probably best suited to answer any legal questions or implications, if you have any. And members, I am now happy to answer any questions and respectfully reserve the right to close.
Certainly. Members, any questions for Representative Stickland? Representative Hinojosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Stickland. I just now am getting a chance to look at the amended version of your bill that's been submitted to the committee. Can you tell us what are the differences between the two bills?
And I believe that we submitted to you a quick comparison
I'm trying to read it right now, but I'm
of that. Depending on what you would like to know specifically, the biggest things that the committee substitute will bring in TABC signage into the bill. And in regards to holster, we are striking shoulder and belt holster, because we want the holster to be able to be an ankle holster or whatever you want. So holster still exists, but we're not going to dictate specific kinds of holsters. Those are the two biggest changes. There were also a couple of small provisions within the bill. There's a lot of different sections that this code touches, and so we went back. There was one that dealt with the Lower Colorado River Authority, had some language and some very obscure things, so there were a couple of places that we went and brought the legislation into that as well.
okay. I have some questions about signage too.
Sure.
Given your bill, are you prepared to testify on that, or would that be better reserved for when
It
you're
would probably be
witnesses?
best for Bradley, but
Okay.
if you have specifically,
I'll
I
wait.
can as
I'll
well.
wait. Thank you.
Members, any other questions? I have a question. Representative Ray.
Hey, Mr. Stickland, thanks for bringing this bill forward, and I commend you for doing it. You mentioned 11 states have constitutional carry. I believe that South Dakota recently passed it. Is that right?
I believe it was actually North Dakota.
Did you?
North Dakota, and I do want to say this too. There are a couple other states that would like to claim that they have, and like Montana, for instance, is a state that has constitutional carry everywhere except for one city. But 11 have what we would define as true constitutional
pure
carry.
constitutional carry.
Yes, sir.
There's probably like as many as 16 states that have some form of permitless carry, we might say, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And
there are a number of different states that currently have it in some part of their legislative process.
including a number of our neighboring states, is that right?
That is correct.
Like Oklahoma,
I believe so. I don't know what the status is of that specifically, but I know that.
Kansas, I
Yes.
believe.
Yes, sir.
Mississippi.
Mississippi and Kansas already are constitutional carry states.
Arkansas, I think that one may be a little bit disputed, but Arkansas has a form of permitless carry or constitutional carry. And I'm just using the phrase permitless because I understand the distinction you're drawing between a pure scenario.
Yes. Right.
So there are a number of states already doing it, including some of our neighboring states. That's my point.
Yes, sir.
That's a fair statement.
Yes, yes, sir. That is fair. This is becoming the norm, and we're trying to catch up.
I had one other question. I know in looking at some of the other things we've looked at, the legislature, our legislative body in the 84th session passed the open carry bill.
Correct.
I think and you're leaving in place the LTC regime.
We are. Interestingly enough, Representative, I know there's some other efforts, and not to dog on them. I have openly stated that I will vote for any advancement of Second Amendment rights, including Chairman King's bill. But I do believe that constitutional carry is the only way for us to not negatively affect state revenue. Because what we have seen in the states that have already passed constitutional carry is they continue to sell their LTC or CHL licenses at the same increased rate. So if we're worried about it from a budget standpoint, our bill simply will continue the same revenue stream. Now, I don't think someone's Second Amendment right should be sold back to them. And we're going to give Texans the chance to choose whether they want to have that license for reciprocity reasons or just to have it with them, whatever they would like. We want to leave that option in there. And we think because of that option, state revenue will not be affected negatively.
Okay, this is my last question I have for you. I believe that since we enacted that in the last legislative session, I think some people have become aware that there are places throughout Texas law where the word concealed still appears. Have you tried in your substitute to strike those occurrences of the word concealed in various places?
I believe Bradley will be able to do that, but that was our intention, was to make this, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Got a question, Chairman.
Chairman Navarez.
Representative Stickland, let's assume that the item is revenue neutral, and I don't really have any reason to believe it's not. But why do you believe that those states that have enacted it have not seen a drop in revenue from licensing when you don't have to pay?
Well, I believe most people enjoy the ability to travel from state to state, and we have many agreements with other states, reciprocity things, and I don't want to drive into Oklahoma and accidentally be a felon according to their laws. So a lot of people still see the value in those licenses and continue to get them.
So if that tells me that if the revenue doesn't drop, then the amount of people that are possessing firearms under a state's version of permit carrying doesn't diminish or increase by constitutional carry. Is that right? Because you're talking about what you're describing is a more affluent sector of the population, right?
Well, like I said in my opening statement, one of the reasons that I have been passionate about this is I think that people who are going to benefit most from constitutional carry is the lower income folks, the people who look at the fact that they have to pay hundreds of dollars with the fee and mandatory classes as a barrier to entry. I believe those are the folks who are going to benefit the most, who right now, like I said, are potentially walking around unarmed and can't afford to make those payments to the government for their rights.
Well, if that's the concern, then are you familiar with what's called a pauper's affidavit?
I am not.
Okay. I am, and I'll tell you what it is. Is when in order for you to have access to the courts, if you can demonstrate that you don't have the wherewithal or the means to file certain documents that a court clerk has to charge you for, because as in this, it's a fee, you're entitled to fill out a pauper's affidavit saying, you know what, I can't pay that. But by doing this, and like you said, the Second Amendment is a sacrosanct right. So they file these pauper's affidavits so they can access the courts, which they should be able to do. Don't you feel that a pauper's affidavit, if the intent of your bill, and you've stressed this more than once today, the intent of your bill is to allow access to this group of people. If we just implemented a pauper's affidavit for that class of people, problem solved, right?
Well, let me restate that if there was some confusion.
Well, no.
One of the
I'm not
reasons that
confused at all. I mean,
I know.
I
One of the
understand
reasons that
the
I'm
confusion.
passionate about this is I think it's going to help those people. But the main constitutional reason that I filed this bill is I don't think government has the right to sell us back our rights.
But
That is the main reason.
But
So-
but that flies in the face with your idea. If that were true, then why make it you actually do agree with the government selling back the rights, because you're making this an option. In other words, you're telling us that these states still have revenue coming in, meaning
Sure.
people are paying, so you're okay with that. So you, in fact, are okay with the government selling you back your rights because you're promoting a bill that, wait, let me finish, Representative Stickland, because it's a question, there's a question at the end. You're promoting a bill that, in fact, allows fees to be charged, and I'm not criticizing you, it is what it is. You're promoting a bill that allows fees to be charged, and yet you've advanced the idea here at least 3 times by my count, because I wrote it down, that this bill is for the poor, huddled masses. And so I'm giving you a really easy solution so we don't have to spend 10 hours here today doing this, is amend your bill so that we have a pauper's affidavit and we'll go forward.
Representative, I think there's a difference between what you're talking about and what I would like to see. I do not think that government has the right to say you have a Second Amendment right only if you take this class and pay this fee. If people want to opt into that system on their own accord for reciprocity reasons or whatever else they can come up with, then I think that should be their choice. But right now, there is no way for us to legally carry, unless it's a long rifle, legally carry without begging the government for permission. And that is the notion that I reject.
But you are still including a class of people who will have to beg the government that will be allowed the option to beg the government for the
If
rights.
they can legally possess a gun, then we should think they should have the right to carry constitutionally without paying a fee
I mean, I think we're going to
or
have this.
a mandatory class.
I think this conversation is going to be had during the course of the afternoon, because it wasn't until you started talking that I realized that there's an easy fix to what you want to do, because I'm very inspired by your concern for the poor and downtrodden, and I want to.
Well, I will gladly bring the co-sponsor sheet by your office.
Well, I'm not that
and collect-
inspired.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Representative.
Members, any other questions? Representative.
Sure. Representative Stickland, thank you for coming today, bringing this forward. I have just a question. What's the legal age, just to clarify the legal age for the possession of a firearm?
18 years old.
Okay. And then currently the legal age for the license to carry or open carry is?
21.
Okay, so is it your intention to change any of the ages, 18 to 21, 20, back to 18, just starting at 18 going forward?
Yes, we believe that if someone can legally possess a firearm, that they should be able to carry that firearm. So that is our intention, yes. Now, we still have federal restrictions, which I believe was in some documentation that we provided you with, that would limit certain people, felons and mentally unstable and whatnot, that would still apply. But our argument is that if you can legally possess the weapon, that you should be able to carry it. And I would tell you, too, Representative, right now that applies to long guns and long rifles in this state. So it's not a completely fair comparison, but it's pretty close to say what we're trying to do is apply the same principles that are for an AR-15 currently in the state of Texas to a 9mm or a pistol. Because right now you are not required to take a class or pay a fee for the ability to carry a long rifle where you would like.
And that includes institutions of higher education as well. So
Correct. This bill has absolutely no expansion of where someone can carry. That is a different bill and a different argument.
So the way that our laws are currently with the LTC and campus carry, you do have to be 21 because you have to be 21 to have the LTC. This would now expand everyone 18 up to 21 if passed with no license to carry.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
And like I stated before, the signage would still stay the same for the 30-06, 30-07.
And now license to carry optional courses for reciprocity will be open to 18-year-old and up. Would you be able to take a license? You'd be able to.
We are not changing the LTC license. So if they wanted to get the LTC license, they would have to be 21.
You could legally possess a gun at the age of 18 up until 21, but you could not take the license to carry course until you turn 21?
I believe that is correct, yes, sir.
Okay. That's my question.
Representative Hinojosa.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have a clarifying question based on your prior conversation with Representative Holland. So your bill would then change existing law for purposes of public universities, whereas because currently they have to be 21 to possess a gun on the campus of a public university, but because a license would no longer be necessary, then the age would be reduced to 18 for our public universities. Is that right?
Yes,
Thank you.
I believe so.
Thank you.
Yes. Trying to follow the way that you stated it, but yes.
Members? Representative Burns.
Thank you, Representative Stickland. You and I have talked about this bill several times. I appreciate you bringing it to us.
Sure.
And I just had a real quick question, and if you can't answer, we may have some experts that might
Sure.
be able to. I know that
I'll give it a go.
folks have been very concerned as we move the bar for the Second Amendment that I totally support. Folks have issued concerns. They were concerned when we moved to open carry last session the sky was going to fall. We did not see that. And studies have shown that, and I don't have those figures in front of me, but studies have shown that crime rates did not increase. And but one of the concerns of some of the folks that would oppose your bill have been that we're going to see incidences of violent crime, of gun-related crimes increase. Do you have any data or generalizations that would speak to that fact and maybe alleviate some of those fears?
Absolutely, and I think there's a couple witnesses later today that'll be focused on that, but let me just give you a couple that I find very interesting. This is from the FBI. Average firearm murders per state for all 50 states is 192. The average firearm murder per state for all constitutional carry states is 93.3, almost 100 less in the places that have passed constitutional carry. Not to steal the thunder of some of the other statistics, but I will tell you that when I had folks come to me originally about constitutional carry, when I jumped all in was when I looked at the statistics of where they had passed it and look at that in comparison to places like Chicago and the gun restrictions they have tried to employ on their citizens and what has happened to the crime rates and murder rates there. Again, this goes back to the notion that criminals don't really care what we do in this building, okay? And I just fundamentally believe that when we talk about gun restrictions or regulations, it's the good people that me and you want out there taking personal responsibility for themselves and their neighbors and their house. That's who we want to be armed. We should be finding ways to promote that kind of personal responsibility, not enabling criminals who disregard our law by disarming our citizens based on a fee and a required class. So thank you for asking that, and I think you'll get more of those statistics as the day goes.
Good deal.
And if not, we'll hit it at the end.
You bet. Look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember,
Chairman, if that's it, I'll reserve the right to close.
we through? Okay. We sure
Thank
will.
you.
Now, which gentleman did you want to go first?
I believe Dudley has to leave on a plane first, so if you don't mind, we'll
Okay.
start with him. And then
Chair calls Dudley Brown. Mr. Brown, if you would tell us who you represent, state your name, who you represent, and whether you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dudley Brown with the National Association for Gun Rights. I'm the president, and I have staff here in Texas, have for a number of years. I'm representing our 350,000 plus members here in the state of Texas. And we're very active in it. We're very interested in what you're doing on firearms issues, have been for a number of years. And I'm based up in Colorado, but enjoy coming down to Texas, and especially like the comments about civility from the chairman. I've spent 24 years representing gun owners around the country and in Congress, and nearly all of it has been centered around one state-level issue, and that's constitutional carry. We used to call it Vermont law because Vermont was the first state that didn't actually prohibit permitless carry, and therefore it was legal. And everyone said, it'll never happen again, and then it happened in Alaska, where a Democrat ran it. And then it happened in Arizona. And then my organization got quite active in Cheyenne and passed it in Wyoming, and the dominoes continued to fall. You asked a question about South Dakota or the Dakotas. Yes, last week the governor signed in North Dakota. It's probably the weakest constitutional carry law in the state, in the country, but still qualifies under that. South Dakota actually passed it. I was up in Pierre several weeks ago testifying in front of a similar committee, and the bill passed, but the governor vetoed it, and we failed to override the veto by a few votes yesterday. There are some states that come close, that their laws are, of course, every state's laws are different, and so crafting a bill, you can't all shove them into the same mold. However, some of them, as you said, Montana doesn't quite fit there. But we just saw New Hampshire pass it. In fact, that's kind of interesting. Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine exceed Texas's gun rights. And that's kind of interesting from being from New England. Almost anybody you talk to in the country expects Texas to have the best gun laws. And I think understandably so. That's certainly the reputation. What I don't think we have some petitions. I don't know if they'll come up later. I think 75,000 plus petitions from the state of Texas to ask you to pass 375, the committee substitute for 375, and for a simple reason that we think it's a very clean law. It satisfies what we would all call constitutional carry or permitless carry, and we think it empowers citizens to actually exercise those responsibilities without some burden, which I would consider, let's say, open carry with a permit, somewhat of a burden. What we find in states is once you pass constitutional carry is that burden to entry for many people who didn't think about carrying concealed because, frankly, they didn't want to go through the trouble of asking for it, for a permit, and going through the training, which that's their prerogative. I don't think it's necessarily smart, but it's their prerogative. And they decided not to. In many states, in fact, in all the states we have some data for, we find that the number of permits stays flat issued after constitutional carry, and then it starts going up again. And we believe, and all our research shows, that it's because that barrier of entry of carrying starts making the soccer mom, and the many people think, oh yeah, I'd like to carry, and then I'd like to carry when my family goes on a trip to the next state or across the country. I'd like to be able to carry in my car for self-defense. And so that's when they go out and apply for the permit. It also, once you've carried for a while, I think most of the people in this room would attest, because there are a lot of people here carrying firearms, is once you carry, you get more comfortable with it. Well, if you've lowered that burden, that kind of barrier to entry, and then you start carrying more often,
Mr. Brown, I think
You do.
Chairman Navarez had a question.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
please do, sir.
And I missed some of the preamble up to your testimony, and I caught the introduction. But do you testify ever as an expert in this subject area of the law, state to state, or?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, so what and in courtrooms or just in this setting?
Yes, sir. I've testified in courtrooms. I've testified in front of the Colorado Court of Appeals. I've testified in a great number of gun cases in legislatures and Congress.
Now, let me ask you this question then. And obviously, you're familiar with Representative Stickland's bill, right?
Yes, sir.
What does the bill have any sort of provision regarding a police officer's ability to stop somebody who's carrying a holstered weapon now? That, in other words, once the law comes into effect, there will be people that will carry openly who do not have a permit or have not paid a fee, correct?
Most certainly.
Okay. And then there will be a class of people that will be carrying weapons that have taken the class and paid the fee, correct?
Most certainly.
Okay, and so nobody's going to be wearing a T-shirt or a hat saying, hey, I paid the fee, or hey, I didn't, right?
Of course not.
And that's silly.
Unlikely anyway. Yes. You
Hey,
never know, though.
You never know. And,
We're a different lot.
right.
So,
And so there's going to be those two classes of people carrying weapons, and as Representative Stickland so astutely pointed out, criminals don't really respect what we do in this building because they're criminals, right?
correct. And so you punish them for the act.
Now, what does the police or law enforcement have the ability to check whether this person has a permit or not?
Well, they certainly can. They certainly could check whether someone had a permit.
By asking you, like if they saw you walking down the street and you're strapped, does the bill allow or not allow a police officer to walk up to you and say, sir, are you within the class of people that do not have a permit, and if so, you're good? B, sir, are you in that class of people that have a permit, and if so, you're good? Or C, are you in that class of people who is a lawbreaker who should neither have the ability to carry the weapon because you're prohibited by federal law, or you didn't take the class? Does the police officer have that ability?
Well, I don't know too many police officers can read people's minds.
No, that's why they're asking.
Yeah.
That's what they ask.
Well, they can ask, but of course the criminals aren't going to answer that anyway. Would the current Texas state law require a permit holder to submit that say yes, I have a permit?
Let me
Of
follow
course it
that
could.
up to its logical conclusion. You just said something very important. The criminal's not going to admit that, right? So if I walk up to criminal A and say, sir, you don't have a permit to carry that, no? Hey, but the law allows me to carry my gun without a permit or having a class. The inquiry stops right there, right?
Unless they have probable cause.
So the law enforcement has no probable cause for some other reason. The mere carrying of a firearm doesn't create probable cause. You would agree with me, right?
Oh, of
And
course
it
I would agree with you.
shouldn't, right?
That's right.
All right. And so you're now going to create another class of people that can stymie the law because they're arch criminals like Lex Luthor, right, running around out there. They can stymie the law by telling the police officer, hey man, you can't ask me about whether I have a permit or not because this is Texas, bud. And around Texas, we roll without permits and without paying the fees. Am I right?
I kind of see where you're going.
I think
But-
you see where I'm going.
Yeah?
But am I right?
At least in theory, yes.
Well, no. Let's put it in practice. I mean, the things that you've been talking about are in theory. So if those things exist in theory and in practice,
They're not in theory, actually. We have 11 states with data. And this is not a theory. In fact, in some states, in Alaska, we have, 8 years worth of data, 9 years worth of data.
But you have data on that. You have data on how many people have lied to the police about whether they can legally carry a gun.
We do have data on how many people have been detained for carrying a firearm illegally.
And so my next question is, in reading Jonathan's bill, and Jonathan and I had this discussion offline, and normally I wouldn't talk about discussions offline, but I don't think this is benign. Jonathan was
Wait,
telling-
which? Yeah, I'm just kidding. Is this the fantasy football thing? Okay.
Comes around again, John.
Touche, brother.
Ba-dum-bum.
So Jonathan was telling me that the normal prohibitions to carrying a firearm, being the federal government prohibitions for carrying a firearm, would still apply. Is that your understanding in reading his bill?
Well, I'm not sure actually what you're saying because, of course, you're talking about possession or purchase or for
Possession.
carrying where you can't
The
carry.
possession. I'm talking about a felon possession.
Possession.
So it's talking
Yeah, they always apply. You can do anything you want in the Texas legislature, but the federal laws are going to apply on that.
So would you agree with me that it would be more difficult to determine whether or not a person who is a felon is actually in possession of a gun unless there's something secondary to the gun carrying that would lead law enforcement to that conclusion? Does that make sense?
Yes, and Representative Navarez, in fact, in all those states that have this law, or for instance, Vermont, they still don't have those problems. Law enforcement there isn't screaming and yelling that there's blood on the streets or that too many criminals are carrying because, again, they're stopping people all the time and they're saying they don't have a permit and not finding people in record numbers who are carrying as criminals.
How many? Let's compare Vermont to Texas for a minute. And I don't like to go. I mean, really, we shouldn't compare Texas to Vermont. That's not
Yeah.
fair to Vermont. But I'm not one prone to hyperbole in terms of blood. That's not what I'm talking about. But how many people own or possess firearms in Vermont as opposed to a place like Texas? Texas is a lot different. You would agree, right?
Yeah, the numbers actually in Texas are substantial. Yeah.
And so we're talking about an issue, and I don't want to call it a problem yet because we haven't crossed that bridge, but we're talking about an issue where, you got a plane to catch? Is that right?
I'm okay.
I'm going to wrap it up right now. We're talking about an issue that when we're dealing with the numbers, it's a whole different animal than when you start comparing it to a place like North Dakota, South Dakota, or Vermont. I mean, we really are comparing apples to oranges when we're talking about the logistical problems, correct?
Or Kansas.
Or Kansas.
Kansas with portions of St. Louis, or portions of the large cities, Wichita. That's not a bad comparison to a smaller version of Texas. It has very rural areas, has some relatively large
I mean, and I no disrespect, but I'm gonna put
municipalities.
I'm gonna put Kansas aside.
Okay.
Give me another state that we could compare to Texas in terms of gun ownership.
Missouri.
Okay. Same amount percentage or numbers?
I think it's relatively close,
Really?
percentage-wise. Yeah.
How-
Sorry, I'm from Colorado, and we have large numbers in Colorado, though we would call ourselves a purple state. And I don't know that the reputation is deserved from the statistics I've seen.
Can I jump in there, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I just wanted to add one more thing or ask one more thing. Is again relative to the numbers. Again, I want to talk about the numbers because it's important as we go throughout the day. And Representative Stickland brought you up here as an expert witness and a resource, and so you're probably the last person I'm going to ask questions about this because once you leave, you're gone. But relative,
Oh, we'll
to
be back, Representative.
Well,
We'll
I mean,
definitely be back.
relative to
You can
the-
trust us on that.
Now, again, relative to the numbers, you would agree that you don't have a state that approximates the logistical issues that Texas has with their gun ownership.
No, I don't agree.
Now, that's all I got.
Can I?
Thanks.
Go to Missouri.
Yeah, but I kind of want to keep it moving forward, but.
Yeah, I just want to give you a couple things. Obviously, it's hard to compare any state to Texas, population and size-wise. However, in Arizona, for instance, 6.479 million people in their metropolitan statistical area. There are a number of different things, including Kansas City, some large urban areas, that I think if you kind of piece those together, and Representative, I have that data available for you if you'd like to look at it. But yes.
And we're going to let Mr. Pierce testify next, but I want to go ahead and mention the next three to come up on a panel so you can be getting ready will be David Williams, Rick Briscoe, and Justin DeLoche. And Justin, I know you're going to want to bring those boxes in, and we've already kind of worked out how to do that.
Let me substitute one of those names. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Do you just need someone to help carry them in, or?
Well, initially we talked about having the two organizations that were responsible.
I know we're not testifying right now. We're doing logistics, so we don't have an issue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry for interrupting you.
That's all right. Go ahead. I want to.
Initially, we were going to have both organizations that were responsible for the petitions.
Okay. If you'll come up and tell the assistant clerk who we need to do for that, because we want to, ladies and gentlemen, what we're trying to do, we've got a bunch of boxes out there with like 75,000 names in them, and so we can't have them in the hall and don't really have room for them in here, so we kind of worked a way out. They're going to bring them in while they testify, and then they're going to take them out and take them to another office. So we're just kind of trying to work through those logistics. All right, Chair recognizes, who do we have next?
Bradley Pierce.
Bradley Pierce. And Bradley, if you would state your name, who you're representing, if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375, and please remember we've got the 2-minute timer going over here.
Yes,
Thank you.
Chairman. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, members, my name is Bradley Pierce. I am here for HB, the committee substitute, HB 375. I'm an attorney here in Texas, and I represent the National Association for Gun Rights as outside legal counsel, speaking on their behalf and also speaking on my own behalf. And in addition to practicing law for the last 10 years, I was also a Texas concealed handgun license instructor for several years myself. First of all, thank you for your work on these bills under consideration today, and thank you in advance for your patience. I know it's going to be a long day, so thank you in advance for that. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about this bill and answer any questions you may have. I'll be here throughout the day if you have any technical questions about the language or technical issues with the bill that I can answer. HB 375, or the committee substitute, expands handgun carry in Texas to all citizens who are not otherwise prohibited by law from possessing a handgun. Currently, these law-abiding citizens can own and carry a rifle. They can own and carry in public a shotgun. They can own a handgun. They can carry that handgun on their own property. They can carry that handgun on their own business. They can carry that handgun in their car, in their RV, on their boat, all without a license. However, current Texas law prohibits these law-abiding citizens from carrying a handgun outside of these places unless they apply for and are granted a license to do so by the state. HB 375 resolves this disparity among law-abiding citizens by providing that anyone who can already lawfully own and carry a rifle and a shotgun, and who can already lawfully own a handgun and carry it in many places, that those same law-abiding citizens can legally carry anywhere without a license that a person with a license may currently carry. Of course, we support Committee Substitute House Bill 375 because it amends Texas law to provide for constitutional carry.
Let me, if I can interrupt you on a couple of questions
Yes, sir.
that I had as we were listening to it. Keep referring to if you can carry it under federal law. What does that mean?
So federal law has a number of provisions for prohibited persons. There are certain people that are prohibited from possessing a firearm. People who are, felons. People who are, as the federal law puts it, I don't like the term. I think they're seeking to change it, but are called mental defectives. It's not a good term, but that's what the federal law says. People along those lines are already prohibited under federal law from possessing a firearm. Those people are prohibited through that. Those people in Texas are prohibited from possessing and carrying a firearm, and under HB 375, they will continue to be prohibited from carrying and possessing a
Is there
firearm.
an age restriction?
There's an age restriction under the federal law of 18.
So the question that came up earlier, because I know Mr. Stickland's intent is for this not to change anything with regard to campus carry, any laws with regard to where or how you the fact that you can't carry, where alcohol in a bar, nightclub, that type of thing.
Right.
Since this would lower that to 18, is his bill, the way it's written, in the committee substitute anyway, how's it going to affect campus carry in other places where there's a 21 age limit?
Right. So the purpose of the bill, or one of the main goals of the bill, was that anyone who can possess a firearm, a handgun, can carry that firearm. And right now, under both state and federal law, a person can possess a handgun at the age of 18. So the bill allows them to carry that.
So would the bill have the effect of allowing someone to carry on a campus at age 18? Just
Yes, sir. In fact, they can already carry on campus as long as they don't go into buildings, even with rifles and shotguns right now.
I may be wrong, but I think we've got a 21. You have to be 21 to carry on campus.
Right, that's the current.
And so this would, I'm just clarifying, I'm not saying it's right or wrong or good or bad, I'm just trying to make sure I understand the bill. Would it have the effect of lowering the campus carry to 18?
Because right now, campus carry requires a license, and the license requires the age of 21. This would eliminate that because you wouldn't have to have a license. So by default, there's no age on campus carry. So because it's just
you have to be 21 to have a license.
Right. Yes, sir.
Okay,
and so
so
this would just default to the 18.
Okay, so if you had a license, you could only have it on campus if you're 21. If Representative Stickland?
For pistols, but I think what he's saying is that they could have a long rifle currently, as long as it's not in one of the buildings that is restricted with the signage.
Right, that's what I was explaining. An 18-year-old can already carry a rifle or shotgun onto a college campus as long as they don't go into one of the buildings or a portion of a building.
All right. But as for a handgun, this would lower it from 18 to 21 if they do not have a license.
Correct.
But if they have a license, they'd have to be 21 or be in violation of the statute.
Well, no, they would.
Because you either got to have a license or not have one. I mean, if you got one, then
You would not have to have a license.
I guess where I'm going.
If you had one.
If you got a license, are you required to adhere to the 21 requirement?
No, sir, because there's no longer a licensure requirement for campus carry.
Okay. I think that's something you probably need to think about clarifying, because I know your intent was to not change anything with regard to campus carry.
Where they can carry. Yes, sir.
Right.
Okay, but the age you did intend to lower to 18.
That was our intention.
Okay.
That
Yes,
happened
sir.
by
Okay,
default.
I misunderstood that.
Yes.
Is it going to have any effect on the prohibition against carrying in where alcohol is served?
It's not going to have not 51% businesses. So currently, if you have a license to carry, you cannot carry in a business that derives more than 51% of their revenue from on-campuses or on-premises consumption. So you can't carry there under current law with a license, and you cannot carry there under this bill without a license. Correct.
Okay. And so what other than are the only federal requirements that we're talking about, is that basically when you go in to buy a handgun and you got to fill out the form if you don't have a license to carry, and you've actually got to go in and fill out the form? And do you have to, those 8 or 10 requirements, is that what we're talking about?
Right. There's a number: convicted of a felony, fugitive from justice, unlawful user of controlled substance, illegal alien, dishonorably discharged, renounce your citizenship, a number of other federal prohibitions that would still apply to people here in Texas.
Would those be the only restrictions?
There are a couple of additional restrictions here in Texas in addition to the lengthy federal list. There's also, Texas kind of doubles down on no felons. Also, if someone's subject to a protective order or restraining order, right? Yes, sir. Those would remain in place.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, continue. I took a little bit of your time there. Go
No,
ahead.
I was actually wrapping up right then. I was just going to express again my thanks and that I'm available.
Well, thank you for being. Any members, any questions?
I just want to say one more
Senator
thing. I do think that there's merit in looking into the dropping of the age from 21 to 18. Not that you shouldn't, but what I tried to point out just a second ago is that currently you have to be 21 to get your LTC and take the course and apply for the license. But if you leave LTC in place and you allow 18-year-olds who are legally able to possess a gun to now constitutional carry, they still have to wait 3 years before they could go take an instructional course to improve their firearm knowledge.
I believe
By
they
law.
could still take the course, Representative, if they wanted to. They just wouldn't be able to get the actual permit done. So there's nothing that's restricting them.
Purpose for that, though?
I'm sorry.
If you're allowing them to have the gun constitutionally, why would you wait for them to be able to get the license to carry?
Well, I think that's probably a different bill, to be honest with you. I'm not saying I disagree with that, but
Is it for reciprocity purposes?
we've been working closely with DPS and talking to them about what their relationship with other states and the agreements they've come to, and that has come into account on some of the things that we have done with this bill. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Just one last question for me. Would it have any effect? You said it won't matter. It doesn't change where someone would carry. So the universities that have, like the private universities that have opted out, they would still be able to ban, and the universities, the state universities that have set up different locations where you can and cannot carry, that would all still be in place?
Right. Those place restrictions would remain in place.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman.
We really need for one person to testify at a time,
Okay.
so let me just stick with Mr. Pierce.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, the bill does not change where someone may carry.
Okay, good. Members, any questions? If not, Representative Hinojosa, do you have a question for Mr. Pierce?
Well, I have a question about crime statistics. I don't know if you have this. I understand also we have a representative from DPS who might be available. I'll try you, if that's okay. I keep hearing this claim, and it sounds right to me that criminals don't care what we're doing in this building, and they will find a way to get a gun. And I'm wondering if we have data on how they get those guns. What are the ways they come in possession?
I'm going to have to defer that one. I'm here to speak on the legal language of the bill and what it does, but I think there are definitely some folks here who can speak to that.
Thank you.
Could I address just one thing that Representative Navarez brought up a moment ago?
Very quickly.
Okay. You know, we as far as a officer being able to stop someone who's carrying a firearm, you know, an officer currently has to have probable cause that a person's committing a crime in order to stop them. And in the exercise of your other constitutional rights, those do not constitute grounds for being stopped by a police officer. Neither should carrying a firearm and exercising that constitutional right be grounds for carrying a firearm. And our bill actually has a provision that says that if that's the sole reason, a peace officer may not disarm or detain a person solely because the person is carrying a handgun. Again, exercising constitutional rights is not grounds for being stopped by a police officer.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah.
Chairman Navarez.
The difference is though, carrying a pencil is not a crime.
Neither is it a constitutional right.
Carrying a firearm could be a crime if you're a felon, right?
Yes, that's
Okay,
right.
so in fact, if a felon is carrying a firearm, he's committing a crime.
That's correct.
So a police officer, in fact, can get around the probable cause issue because the minute he somehow ascertains that the person carrying the firearm is a felon, there's probable cause. In other words, carrying a firearm is not a crime, but there are certain circumstances where carrying a firearm is a crime, and that's when you're a felon.
Right.
And so, again, it's different than carrying other objects that don't have criminal implications tied to them based on your status in society, correct?
Correct. Again, those other objects are not constitutionally protected, and additionally, we have what's called presumption of innocence, and so a person carrying a firearm is entitled to that presumption of innocence.
Good. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do something a little bit unusual. It's just going to take another second. These three witnesses were two witnesses and Representative Stickland. These were the two that he had requested to help him lay out the bill. So we gave a little bit more time, and we went through that. To the extent at all possible, we're really going to try to hold to the 2-minute rule from here on out so that everybody that wants to testify today can testify today. Doing something a little bit different here. I'm going to call Zach Lautenschlager. Did I get close? You did. Okay, good. Justin DeLoche and David Williams. And they've got a bunch of boxes. I told them they could stack them here because they wanted the committee to see the number of petitions they had done, and then again, as soon as their testimony is finished, they're going to hustle them all out. Now, just so the next three can be getting ready, the next three witnesses will be Todd Harrison, Deborah Bell, and Jessica Anderson. So if you are Todd Harrison, Deborah Bell, or Jessica Anderson, please get ready to testify on the next panel. Got a few more boxes to go, I think. So, yes, you can take a picture of the boxes. That's fine. So. You can see why I made them promise they would take the boxes out when they left. So they're going to cover up the chair. If we have a short witness, we're not going to be able to see him at this point. So sit tall. All right. Is there one particular wants to go first? And you're Mr. Lautenschlager?
Lautenschlager, yes.
All right. If you would, state your name for the record, who you represent, and whether you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity. Zach Lautenschlager, Vice President of the National Association for Gun Rights. I won't, or I'll try not to repeat any of the points that my colleagues or Representative Stickland has made. We are here today to deliver over 70,000 petitions between the National Association for Gun Rights and our allied organization, Lone Star Gun Rights, which is Justin's organization. They are all in support of House Bill 375, and our 350,000 members in Texas do strongly support this legislation and are paying very close attention to this hearing and to the bill as it moves through the process. So thank you again for your accommodation, Mr. Chairman, and for allowing us to present these petitions.
Do you want to tell us about the petitions and how they were put together, or does the next
I would be glad to. And I will let Justin cover some of that as well. But these petitions have been gathered over the last several months solely from our membership, and in the case of our 50,000, our membership in Texas. I'll let Justin address those gathered from his membership.
And are they all, they're all from Texas?
They are.
And how many do you estimate they are from your organization?
Over 50,000.
Okay. Do you mind if we don't count them? All right. We'll just trust you on the record that it's at least 50,000. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the trust.
Okay. Thank you. Chair recognizes Justin DeLosh. Justin, please again for the record state who you are,
Yes.
who you represent, and are you testifying on, for, or against HB 375?
My name is Justin DeLosh, and I'm representing myself and Lone Star Gun Rights. And again, thank you for having this hearing, Representative King. My name is Justin DeLosh. I am representing myself and Lone Star Gun Rights, and I am testifying in favor of HB 375. Founded in 2014, our grassroots gun rights advocacy organization had two specific missions: to protect the right to bear arms for all Texans and to get constitutional carry enacted. Growing to over 70,000 members in just 3 years, our message conservatively reaches over 1 million people per month in Texas. And our membership grows daily. Each and every person joins us with the same mission, and today I represent them. There has been some debate recently as to what constitutional carry means. To Lone Star Gun Rights, it means that the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is the law of the land, especially when supplemented by the Supremacy Clause of Article 6 as well as the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. We support H 375 because it allows for anyone legally allowed to possess a firearm under state and federal law to bear arms without seeking permission from the government. This bill restores our right to bear arms instead of treating it like a privilege. I am urging, we are not in favor of any restrictions, qualifications, or other requirements that people must meet in order to carry a handgun. In short, we want the right to carry a handgun to be the same as our right to carry a rifle in this state. HB 375 takes a huge leap towards meeting this end without compromising the LTC program or our reciprocity agreements with 34 other states. I'm urging you to recognize that our right to bear arms does not come from this committee, the Texas legislature, or the governor's mansion, or even from the federal government. Our rights come from our Creator and are protected in the U.S. Constitution with the words, "shall not be infringed." The state of Texas has no authority to regulate the wearing of arms with a view to prevent crime. Criminals carry on a daily basis without getting an LTC, and no amount of regulation will prevent that from happening. The only thing that can be done to prevent crime is to restore our rights to us in full. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And how many signatures do you?
We have 23,000 on our end.
Okay, so we've got a total of almost 75,000.
A little over 75, close to
Very
76,000.
impressive.
Yes,
And bringing them in makes a very good point. Thank you.
we hope so. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes David Williams. Mr. Williams, please state your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
I'm David Williams. I'm testifying in favor of, for House Bill 375. My wife and I, Christine, own Skyraider Arms up by Mansfield, Texas. It's a firearms training facility. I've been certified by DPS to be a licensed carry instructor. I've gotten many NRA certifications. In fact, I train a lot of men and women to go take the DPS course. Mr. Navarez mentioned indigent status. I believe that's where he was going with the license to carry. I was here 2 years ago testifying in front of the Senate subcommittee on open carry when a woman came up and said she tried to apply for indigent status, but she didn't make the mark. She still couldn't afford to take the fees for a license to carry. She couldn't afford to take the training class, and that didn't allow her the ability to go out and buy a gun. She had no way to protect herself. And indigent status is a great thing, but there are those that fall through the cracks that are not capable of affording it. Constitutional carry for someone who does not leave the state of Texas is a reasonable way to go because it removes the restriction of the elevated fees and the restriction of having to pay for a training class in order to carry a gun. By definition, a law-abiding citizen will not carry a gun recklessly. They will seek out training so they are as safe as they can be. They will educate themselves on the laws to carry to ensure that they do not become the criminal they wish to deter, and thereby lose that right to carry. We need to place onerous restrictions upon those who have shown themselves to be a threat to society. Remove the unfair burdens and discriminatory fees on the law-abiding and place that burden on the criminal. When it comes to criminals carrying guns openly, that is the most foolish thing in the world for them to do, because if they're committing an act with a gun, it's increased. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for all three of you for being here today. Members, are there any questions for the panel? Representative Hinojosa.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, I forgot your name, sir.
Justin
DeLoche.
Thank you, Mr. DeLoche. You said something to the effect of the legislature cannot curb our right to carry arms.
Yeah, well, the current Constitution says that you can regulate the wearing of arms with a view to prevent crime, and we do not believe that that should be the law of the land. We think the U.S. Constitution, we think, is supreme when it comes to that, and we think we should abide by it.
I assume you're familiar with the Supreme Court case Heller, written by Justice Scalia.
Yes.
So as I read it, there's a quote here that says the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. It is not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever and for whatever purposes. There's another line that says Second Amendment protects the right to keep and bear arms for certain military purposes, but that it does not curtail the legislature's power to regulate the non-military use and ownership of weapons. So do you believe that this
I think we're kind of going down a rabbit hole, and I think that this particular bill only involves those that are already currently possessing firearms. It has nothing to do with the purchase of firearms. So therefore, I think it's completely irrelevant to this conversation.
I'm sorry.
This bill does not affect the purchase of firearms. It only applies to those who are already possessing these firearms. They already have them in their vehicles. They already have them in their gun safes at the house.
Right, but this
it only
opinion
applies
says
to them.
the right to keep and bear. It doesn't say purchase. So this says the legislature
My
has
point
the
is
right.
it's irrelevant to the bill that we're talking about right now.
But you just
Maybe
said,
I don't understand
I'm
what
sorry,
it is you're
I'm
asking.
sorry, maybe we're not. I thought you just said you don't appreciate any regulation by the legislature because you have.
I do not.
Because you have a U.S. constitutional right to bear arms that the legislature cannot impose itself upon. Is that what you're saying?
You're right. I don't believe the legislature has the right to do that. I think our rights come from our Creator. I don't believe they're granted to us by this panel here.
Well, I'm not saying this panel. I'm talking about
Yeah.
the Supreme Court of the United States and its interpretation of the Constitution. And so it sounds to me like your interpretation is different from Justice.
We might have
Scalia's
different
opinion.
interpretations then, I guess.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Hearing none, thank you.
No problem.
And
Thank you very
we're
much.
going to give y'all just a minute to haul the boxes, and I think you're taking them to Representative Stickland's office, and I think he told me he wanted them on his desk, if I remember right.
Might have some
So,
conversation about that.
Yeah. Yeah, so, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good. While they're carrying them out, again, the next three will be Todd Harrison, Deborah Bell, and Jessica Anderson. Okay. Okay. Except I'll forget who their name is. Yeah, we better, yeah. Pick three. Might be good to get those two, yeah. DPS, OAG. Yeah. Go ahead and bring them up as the resources, that'll work. Actually, I've seen more people open carry today than I have over the last 18 months, so.
It's a growing trend as people become accustomed.
Again, remember, on top of the desk. Let me see, the next three, do you have those yet? Okay. All right. Let's see, why don't we start with Todd Harrison. Mr. Harrison, if you would, please state your name for the record, who you represent, and if you're here testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
My name is Todd Harrison. I'm the president of Combined Law Enforcement Associations of Texas. I want to thank you for allowing me to be here today to testify against committee substitute for House Bill 375. I represent police officers from all across the state of Texas who deal with people on a daily basis. The last session you approved open carry, and you put some protections in there for my members who are working the street. That if we see someone openly carrying, we can question them of whether or not they actually have a license and are legally carrying. This does away with that option for my officers who are out there working the street, dealing with people in very stressful situations, dealing with very dynamic situations. Therefore, I think, you just did it last session. It's maybe let's give us a little bit more time before we go to full constitutional carry. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah Bell, if you would again state your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Deborah Bell. I'm a Senior Sergeant with Dallas County Sheriff's Department. I am here representing the Sheriff of Dallas County, Sheriff Lupe Valdez. I work in the Traffic Division of Dallas County. I've been with the department for 24 years, and I've been a Deputy Sheriff for 18. I'm here to testify against House Bill 375. What we have on the books right now, we're still getting used to as law enforcement. It seeks, but 375 in my understanding, and I will honestly admit that I am still muddling through it, but it believes that it seeks to remove licensing requirement for persons wishing to carry a loaded handgun in public. The sheriff believes each person has a right to bear arms, but with that right, a sacred trust to do so responsibly. She supports the Second Amendment, as I do. We also strongly support, obviously, the law enforcement officers across the state, and our job is to protect the public and one another. House Bill 375 seeks to take away some of our abilities to do that effectively. Each deputy sheriff is required to undergo a comprehensive background investigation, months of training, and extensive firearms training. We believe it's not too much to require any Texan seeking to open carry or conceal carry a firearm to exhibit a working knowledge of basic firearms safety. I'm a firearms instructor with Dallas County and a range master at our department. I'm a firm believer in training. While it's difficult to say that people won't take the liberty to train themselves responsibly, a basic core knowledge, use, and handling of a handgun is essential to build confidence and responsible stewardship for anyone. As a good law-abiding Texan, it would be prudent for anyone not to attempt to drive an 18-wheeler or install any electricity in your home or to practice law in a court setting without supervised training and competency certification. We currently require and expect our young people to learn, retain, and show skill in firearms with hunter safety education classes, and also driving abilities with driver education courses. So in closing, legislation preserving our right to keep and bear arms, it is a fundamental belief of our founding fathers and the majority of our state and national citizens, but rights also bring responsibilities. If you take away the training requirement and licensing requirement, I think that will hamper law enforcement efforts.
Sergeant, let me, if I can interrupt you, how many years have you been in law enforcement?
24 years.
Okay.
I've been a deputy for 19.
All right. Not to put you on the spot, but can you give me some examples of where you think this type of legislation would interfere with an officer's ability to do their job?
More on the training side, I'm a trainer in firearms, and our own people we have to stay on top of to do their training. A prudent person should train themselves. Will they? I don't know. If it's a requirement, at least that's a step. That's a step that, yes, they've done that. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that to ensure that there is some training. I'm not saying that an 8-hour course and a little time at the range is going to qualify anybody to be competent or even be ready to carry a gun, but at least that's a start. And if you take that away, you've taken that away.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Jessica Anderson. Would you please state your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375? And before you start, the next three that we're going to call up will be Robert Odenhall, Catherine Nance, and Kelly Allen, or Aller.
We're calling them, even if they're not testifying, because they double. We need to make sure that
Okay. All right. And as we call you up, if you weren't intending to testify, we have a few people that registered twice. Once it shows that they intended to testify, and then another time that they didn't, and they may have been trying to do it on the next bill or something like that. So if you didn't intend to testify, when I call your name, just let us know, and we'll change it to showing that you did not intend to testify. And I'm sorry, Lieutenant, I didn't mean to jump in front of you there.
No
And if you would state your name, who you represent, and whether you're testifying on, for, or against.
My name is Jessica Anderson. I'm a lieutenant with the Houston Police Department. I'm here representing the Houston Police Department and Chief Art Acevedo, registering opposition to House Bill 375. I don't want to restate what these guys already mentioned, but I think our biggest message is that the law is working. Let's not mess with it just yet. Officers need to be able to determine if a handgun carrier is licensed in certain circumstances, and licensing is important for a lot of the reasons that have been mentioned. And just to touch base on the question that you just asked, one of the primary issues with not being able to, or to answer your question, I think the biggest concern from law enforcement is when somebody calls us and says, hey, there's a suspicious person with a weapon, the law as written wouldn't let us really address that call. We would have to say, call us back when something's happened. And that's not really how the police operate. We like to address problems as they arise and handle them before they escalate. So be able to walk up to somebody and say, hey, what's up? Do you have a license? How's it going? What's going on here? And then move on is the easiest way to handle those situations, as opposed to telling the concerned citizen, sorry, I can't do anything about the guy at the ballpark with the gun, just call me later. As open carry has become a thing, we haven't really been having problems with that. There have been a handful of calls about people concerned about weapons, and that's just how we handle them, just like that. But I think, as written, this bill would prevent us from having those conversations. And then, just to reiterate the training issue, I think requiring a license, the state is taking reasonable steps to ensure informed gun ownership. It's very important that people understand what the different laws are, gun safety, proficiency, that sort of thing. And by having a licensing requirement, the state is taking steps to do that. And then finally, I would respectfully request that when considering the bill, the committee be sensitive to the challenges of law enforcement and the people we serve. I was talking to my Dallas counterparts about the challenges they faced in the aftermath of the July 7th shootings. There's so much chaos and confusion at that time. They had no idea where the shots were coming from. They detained some folks that had long guns to see if they had any connection to the shots being fired, because that's all they could do. Ultimately, it was determined that those people had no connection, but at that moment during the shooting, they had no way of knowing that. In situations like that, officers should expect that anyone openly carrying has a license to do so and not be prevented from verifying that. Again, the Houston Police Department, we feel like we have a responsibility to oppose this bill because, as written, it makes an already challenging profession more challenging.
Thank you, and thank you all for your service as well. Members, the way I'm going to do to kind of keep this kind of rolling along, since we've got another 90-plus witnesses to hear from today, is if you've got questions, kind of signal me. Otherwise, I'll just assume you don't and go on to the next to the next set of witnesses. Thank you all very much for being here today. Chair calls Robert. Did you have one?
I did have a question. I'm sorry.
Who for?
Mr. Harrison and Deputy Bell.
Okay. Yeah, again, members, I'm sorry, it's probably my fault, but if you've got a question for that witness, signal me while they're testifying, because I want to kind of keep rolling here. Chair Representatives recognizes Representative Schaefer, and then, okay, we'll go to Representative Hinojosa.
Thank you all for your testimony. Question for Deputy Bell regarding training. Would you acknowledge that people have a right to carry a handgun in their vehicle, say when they're traveling, when they're driving?
Yes.
And they don't necessarily have to have any training for that, correct? And has that been an issue?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Mr. Harrison, you in your testimony mentioned, I don't remember your exact words, some provision in the open carry bill that dealt with police interactions with someone who's carrying. Can you tell me what you're talking about?
Yes, sir. We had the ability as police officers, if we encounter someone.
I'm going to ask too, since we've got a panel, it's always kind of hard to remember, but before you respond, if you would identify yourself, just so that people
Todd
know.
Harrison.
Thank you.
Sergeant with the Austin Police Department, 30 years.
Yes, sir.
If we deal with someone now and they're carrying a weapon and we're legitimately dealing with them, we have the ability to question them about whether or not they're licensed to carry that firearm openly.
But you mentioned that in the open carry bill that passed in the 84th session that we added some provision regarding that interaction.
That came in as an amendment in the bill coming out of the Senate to give us the authority to ask. Originally, they weren't going to allow us to even ask if they had a license.
I don't remember that amendment, so I'm trying to, and I was there for the bill, so I'm trying to understand what you're talking about.
It came from Senator West on his bill for open carry.
Okay. Well, maybe we
In
just
the law.
Okay. Well, if you could point that out to me, maybe perhaps
Okay.
after you finish
Yes, sir.
testimony, and give me that citation, I would love to look at that. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Representative Hinojosa?
Yes, can anyone on the panel give me some information about your experience as to where people, criminals, felons who shouldn't have guns, how they obtain those guns? In your experience?
They steal them. They steal them, buy them at gun shows, buy them from private individuals selling them. There's a lot of ways they obtain their firearms.
But is it your experience that the primary ways are by stealing them and buying them?
Well, most
at a
of them
gun
aren't
show?
going to the gun stores and buying them from licensed dealers. You have a lot of them that use straw buyers at flea markets. We've had, I believe last year there were several in San Antonio that were arrested by buying guns that were they shouldn't have been buying because they were getting straw buyers, but stealing them.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Yeah, I know they do steal guns. I know people have had them stolen. Mr. Harrison, open carry, going back to that.
Yes.
Did your organization oppose or support the open carry bill last session?
We opposed it.
Okay. And in retrospect, were your concerns, did they materialize in the real world?
No, sir. We haven't had any real tragedies occur because of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair's going to call, thank you for being here. Chair's going to call Renar Bowie with the Department of Public Safety as a resource witness. Mr. Bowie, you still here? Mr. Bowie?
They said that they're going to stand outside.
All right. We'll call him up later. DPS, is he out there somewhere? Or? Okay. We'll get him back up here to answer your question from earlier. Who are your next three? Okay. Is that the last three? Okay. Chair calls Robert Odenhall, Catherine Nance, and Kelly Aller. One of three. We're making progress. I'm assuming you're Robert.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Catherine Nance, Kelly Aller. All right. Catherine Nance and Kelly Aller will be shown. Yeah, it's a little bit. And so did she, but in both times she registered that she did not, that she was opposed to the bill, right? All right. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry for the confusion. Catherine Nance will be shown that she was here representing Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America and herself, and that she was against HB 375 and did not wish to testify. Kelly Aller will be shown to have been representing herself as well as Mothers Demand Action for Gun Sense, and that she was against HB 375 but did not wish to testify. Mr. Odenhall, if you would please state your name, who you represent, whether you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
Thank you. I'm Robert Odendahl.
And we've got you registered twice as well.
Yeah, I changed my mind. To vote, I changed my mind to testify. Originally, I wasn't going to.
Okay. So, proceed.
Okay. I'm Robert Odendahl.
Are you representing yourself or an organization?
I'm originally for myself, but Moms Demand Action, I'm also with them.
Okay.
But this is more personal for me.
All right. And are you testifying on, for, or against HB 375?
Against HB 375.
Okay. Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay. Gave the clerk a copy of what I'm going to say. If you would like to have a copy, sir.
And by the way, that's a great time for me to mention that. If you have written comments, when you come up to testify, just hand them to the clerk, and she'll make sure that we get a copy of that. And if rather than testifying, you would rather just give us those written remarks, we'll certainly keep them, and they'll be entered into the record with the rest of the documents from the hearing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I'm Robert Odendahl. I'm a resident of Austin, Texas. I'm a Texas license to carry holder, a National Rifle Association life member, a veteran United States Army from 1970 through 1972, and a retired law enforcement officer with the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office. I retired as a lieutenant with over 20 years of service. I'm here with the Moms Demand Action. I'm against the unlicensed carry, either open or concealed, as outlined in HB 375. Persons who obtain licenses to carry are fingerprinted and go through a background check to ensure that they can legally possess a firearm. If there is no requirement to obtain a license to carry, then there is no way for anyone, especially law enforcement officers, to ensure that a person can carry and is not in one of the several categories that prohibit them from possessing a firearm. Refer to the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearms Form 443 for a list of those disqualifying categories. Current Texas law requires minimum classroom instruction and range qualification. The classroom instruction is done, if it's done properly, it stresses the do's and don'ts of carry and the use of a firearm. If there is no license requirement, carriers would be left to their own perceptions and possibly false information on when it's justified to point a gun at someone and shoot. Regarding the qualification of at a range, it should be continued and not eliminated. At best, qualifying should be required on a regular basis because shooting is a diminishing skill. A person should be required to demonstrate efficiency in firearm handling and shooting, and preferably on a regular basis.
Mr. Odendahl, I'll have to interrupt you at that point if you could wrap up, or time is up.
Okay.
Is there anything else you wanted to say, just wrapping up?
I just wanted to point out, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your last name.
Representative
I mentioned in here the Heller decision where it said that Justice Scalia said that Second Amendment right is not unlimited, and also point out a certain experience when I was a rookie on the job where I was jumped and a gentleman tried to take my holstered weapon away from me, and my training and quick action basically saved my ass. I wouldn't be here otherwise.
When I was a police officer, I was at a scene of an officer who was shot, and the same thing had happened. They'd taken away, except his holster literally ripped off his belt. The fellow took his gun and shot him in the chest, and it was a difficult day. Thank you very much for being here, Chair Call. Is Mr. Bowie back here? Renaro, would you mind coming on up? We had a resource witness question earlier, and you just happen to be the resource. The next group that we'll be calling up after Mr. Bowie will be Rick Briscoe, Alex Mead, and Marion Hoy. So if you're here, would you kind of get ready to testify? And I think it was Representative Hinojosa had some questions. So would you, before she starts, would you tell us who you are, who you represent, and that you're testifying here as a resource witness?
Renaro Bowie, DPS, as a resource witness.
Thank you. And the question that I have for DPS for yourself is the question that I repeated, that I said previously for the other law enforcement officers who are here, is I'm trying to get an understanding of how people who shouldn't possess guns get in possession of guns. We heard from the other witnesses that it was through theft, primarily maybe flea markets or gun shows. What do you have any data on that?
No, ma'am. The department doesn't collect any data regarding how people get the weapons. But as stated previously, individuals can purchase weapons either, from a business or a firearms dealer, or just from person to person, and those are just a couple of ways that they can do that.
But I'm specifically talking about somebody who's not authorized to possess a gun.
If the individual is not authorized to possess a gun, for example, they may go through what's called a NICS check or a name-based check, and then they would be denied if they are not allowed to carry. But that's done at maybe at dealers where an individual is licensed to deal in the weapon.
Right, but I'm asking how they get them, the ones who do get them. Do you have any data on how they get them?
No, ma'am, we don't.
Okay, thank you.
Members, any other questions for the resource witness? Good, thank you. Chair calls Rick Briscoe, Alex Mead, and Marion Hoy. Thanks for being here with us today. All right, we're missing one. Rick Briscoe, Alex Mead, and Marion Hoy. All right, we'll start with Rick Briscoe.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you.
Good
I am
state.
Rick Briscoe. I am the Legislative Director of Open Carry, Texas. I appear in that capacity and as an individual in support of House Bill 375. Today is a momentous day in Texas history. It is the first time, certainly within my lifetime, if not forever, that a committee of our legislature has had the opportunity to vote to end one of the last remnants of slavery in our state. The short history of gun control in Texas is a sad one. Post-Civil War, statutes were passed for the express purpose of repressing recently freed slaves and other minorities. With the passage of time, we all came to be treated as second-class citizens. Open Carry, Texas believes it is now long past time to bring an end to that. Here's a map that CJ drew up that shows there are 33 states which allow either unlicensed open or unlicensed concealed carry, and roughly a dozen that allow both. And anecdotally, have you heard of particular problems in any of those states? Probably not. Why, even Texas has a limited form of unlicensed carry. It's called the Motorist Protection Act. I've been asking it as a trick question all around the legislature, and I've so far had one person guess it. And I tell people in advance it's a trick question. Under the Motorist Protection Act, a person not prohibited from possessing the firearm, a handgun, is lawfully able to carry it in their motor vehicle, watercraft, so on, as long as it's concealed. And then the follow-up question to that has been, have you been inundated with calls from your constituents about the problems this has created? And they go, no, nobody's called. And so we think that Texas is like other states in the sense that we're no worse than other states. We think we're at least as good as other states. And the experience in all these other states has been that it's been no big deal. So we fervently urge this committee to pass House Bill 375 to restore the rights of the citizens of Texas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before the next witness, the next group will be Anthony Seeley, Randall Gates, and Eric Schaefer. And sir, would you state your name, who you represent, and whether you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375?
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you for hearing me today. My name is Alex Mead. I'm a resident of Pflugerville, Texas, and I'm here to speak in opposition to House Bill 375. Current Texas law has a pretty simple requirement for carrying a gun, that you be trained to carry it. That's a requirement that even Representative Stickland, the author, acknowledges is necessary. He was quoted in the Texas Tribune on January 3rd, 2017 as saying such. Yet this bill would gut the requirement for training by essentially saying that whether or not you're trained and have the training to actually have a CHL, you can still carry a gun. The Rand Corporation did a study in 2008 and found that even the New York Police Department, which is one of the most elitely trained police departments in the nation, still misses the majority of their shots. So it doesn't make sense for us to be reducing the already low requirements that even private citizens have for training. Second, this bill would make it more easy for criminals to carry guns, and this bill does retain some of the restrictions on, say, convicted felons possessing firearms. But as Representative Navarez explained, or was able to clarify in questioning, it would be difficult for an officer to ascertain whether someone carrying a gun is actually qualified to do so unless they have probable cause that they believe that person is not authorized. So even though the law would say there are more requirements to carry guns, they would in practice not be as enforceable. When I consider this legislation, I think back to 2015 as a university student where the legislature passed the open carry and campus carry regulations. And at that time, one of the things that helped me calm my fears was that the people that are able to carry guns would be over 21, they'd all have a license, and so this wouldn't be sort of the Wild West on my college campus. But now this bill would essentially compound the existing campus carry allowances that were passed in 2015 and say anyone from 18 up can carry a gun. And as an 18-year-old myself, I don't think all 18-year-olds are mature enough to be able to possess firearms in a mature manner. And I'd like to conclude by saying, if, as my colleague indicated, calling your offices is what's required to show our opposition to this bill, I'd be happy to mobilize my networks to show just how opposed we are. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Good timing for both of you, too. Thanks. Thanks for being here. Chair calls Anthony Seeley, Randall Gates, and Eric Schaefer. By the way, folks, how's temperature out there? Is it all comfortable? Good. All right. Can you hear okay at the back? All right. Good.
She was supposed to be in that group.
Right. Previously, Marion Hoy was called to testify. She was no longer here, apparently, so she will be shown that she registered representing Texas Gun Sense and herself, and she will be shown not testifying, but against HB 375. Let's.
Mr. Cieli is taking the petitions and dropping them off on us.
All right, we'll bring him up later. Thank you. Randall Gates.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. If you would, please state your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
My name is Randall Gates. I'm here representing myself, and I'm speaking for House Bill 375. I'm asking the committee to pass it out of committee favorably and for a vote in the House. Most of what I wanted to say has already been said here. I'm a honorably retired peace officer. I was licensed, I think, in 1989, a long time ago. And I'm still a licensed master peace officer by the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. And I saw law enforcement come in here and address it, and I think that you're probably aware there are two classes of law enforcement. There's real police who make us safer and our families safer, and then there's snowflake pencil pushers who wind up coming down here and lobbying like this. The real police, they're out on the streets. When they contact an individual in a traffic stop or what, they automatically assume that that individual's armed. And as far as stopping somebody, the real police will be able to make contact, have a conversation, and evaluate it. Bad guys smell different, and the police can smell them. Real police can. That's it.
Thank you. And are you Mr. Schaefer? Selly?
I'm Cieli, yes, sir.
Okay. And you, sir, are?
Eric Schaefer.
Great. Okay. Thank you for testifying. Chair calls Eric Schaefer. I recognize Eric Schaefer.
My name is Eric Schaefer. I'm here representing myself, and I'm speaking for House Bill 375. About 160 years ago, there was a group of people that needed a pass to be able to leave their plantation and be amongst the rest of the people in public. Today, there's another class of people that have to have their pass to exist in public. Right here's my slave pass. By requiring me to have this to be out in public with my firearm, I'm being enslaved. That's infringing on my rights. I view it the same way. I think a lot of people here do too. I think it is incumbent upon this panel to move this bill to the House for a vote to promote freedom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cieli.
Cieli, yes, thank you. I'm sorry. If you would, go ahead and tell us your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375. And before you start, the next three will be Michael, is that Bedard? Badnarik, Doc Green, and Terry Holcomb. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Tony Cieli. I live in the Johnson City, Texas. That's
And
where I'm from.
Are you representing yourself or an organization?
Yes, sir. I'm representing Lone Star Gun Rights as well as myself.
Okay, and are you testifying on
I am
for or
providing written testimony today on HB 375 for the bill. Yes, sir. Texans should not have to pay the state for a permit to exercise any of our other rights under the Bill of Rights. The Second Amendment should be no different than the First or any of the rest. I absolutely support this HB 375 100%. Do not believe it should require a license or a fee or mandatory training to do so. When you take a constitutional protected right and restrict it like the legislation has done and is proposing, it becomes a privilege versus a constitutional right. I'd like to remind everyone of the UT Tower shooting. What if armed citizens that day did not have rifles? Many more people might have died that day. I've got some gun facts here from gunfacts.info. I'm going to move through those because I'm sure you'll hear those the rest of the day today. But Texas has the most restricted gun laws in the nation and lumps us in with California, New York, New Jersey, South Carolina, Florida. Why not Texas for constitutional carry? Like 11 other states, Alaska, Arizona, Idaho, Kansas, Mississippi, Missouri, Vermont, West Virginia, Wyoming, Arkansas, Montana, and just recently New Hampshire shall not be infringed is crystal clear. That's it.
Good. Thank you very much. Don't think there's any questions, so thank you all for
Thank you,
being
sir.
here.
Thank you.
Chair calls
That's a lot.
Michael Benerick, Doc Green, and Terry Holcomb. And let's start with Mr. Holcomb. If you would state your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, my name is Terry Holcomb. I'm the State Republican Executive Committeeman for SD3. I speak on behalf of myself as I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of the Republican Party. I speak in favor of HB 375. Good to see you, sir. The Republican Party of Texas has deemed this as its #1 legislative priority out of the state convention, and it's something that the State Republican Party takes very, very serious. They've worked very, very hard to bring this issue to the table. I would like to thank Representative Stickland for his work on doing that. Also, I can tell you I serve on the Legislative Priority Committee for the State Republican Executive Committee, and this bill is listed as one of the 2 bills that achieved that legislative priority. With that being said, I think we can all agree that both bills that are going to be heard tonight in 375 are probably going to need some work. We're probably going to need to look at how do we get this all the way to the floor and get it to the governor's desk. I'm willing to do that. I've worked very hard on this issue, just as Representative Stickland has, and I think it's something that we can get done this session. I think we probably need to look at taking campus carry out of HB 375, and it would make it more palatable, to actually be able to get to the floor. I think we need to keep the requirements the same to get a license as to carry without a license. And so if it's going to be 18 one way, it needs to be 18 the other. If it's going to be 21 one way, it needs to be 21 the other. And as far as law enforcement goes, ladies and gentlemen, committee members, and with all due respect, these aren't law enforcement officers that are testifying. These are associations and people that are being sent by top heads. In 1995, they got it wrong. They waved the red flag, nothing happened. In 2015, they waved the red flag. They got it wrong, and nothing happened. And I'm telling you, on this issue, they're going to wave a red flag with no data whatsoever. And we have 11 states that have constitutional carry, and we have 33 states with unlicensed open carry. No data to support the position they have. While I respect the job that they do, we should stick with the facts. Thank you.
Representative Hinojosa.
Just to clarify, we had the city of Houston PD, the chief sent one of his officers, not an association, and the sheriff's office of Dallas sent one of their officers. I think if we want to say we respect those officers, we should acknowledge they're not representing associations, they're representing their own organization, the work that they do.
I think that's a fair point.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And Terry, I appreciate the fact that you've come by the office and we've talked through this, and you come prepared and always trying to find ways to answer issues and concerns, and I appreciate your approach on that, and also appreciate your public service. Sir, would you please state your name, who you represent, and whether you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375?
My name is Michael Badnarik. I'm testifying for HB 375. I'm here representing myself and anyone who still cherishes the Bill of Rights. No one in this room or in the state of Texas has a church permit. That is to say, nobody is required to obtain government permission to exercise their religious beliefs. The government has no legitimate authority to convert a right into a privilege by demanding a license or permit for the exercise of that right. Second Amendment was ratified on December 15th, 1791, at exactly the same time as the First Amendment. Logic dictates that if you can't be required to obtain a church permit, then I cannot be required to obtain a concealed carry permit, because it infringes on my inherent right to self-defense. I quote Martin Luther King Jr. Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but one must take it because it is right. I strongly encourage this legislative body to do what is right. Please recognize and respect the right of all Texans to defend themselves and their families. I strongly urge you to pass HB 375. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before you begin, sir, the next three will be Kelly Cook, James Dickey, and Jim Phipps. Sir, you may proceed. Please state your name, who you represent, and whether you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
I'm Doc Green, the amazing Doc Green Show every day on American Voice Radio and Raging Elephants Radio. I'm here to speak on behalf of myself and the thousands of listeners we have nationwide.
Are you testifying on, for, or against?
I am for.
Thank you.
And the reason I'm for is because the Lord Jesus Christ is my God. And if there's anybody up there that calls upon the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, he's your God too. And we could talk about God all day till we put a name on it, but that's the name of my God. And he said very clearly in Luke 22:36 that he values the ability to defend yourself, your family and your friends, even over that of comfort. Because he said, if you don't have a sword, sell your coat and buy one. That's the Lord Jesus Christ talking. The context of that scripture was to defend yourself against an overreaching government. So we find ourselves here today talking to our state legislators, our representatives, and asking you not to place yourself in the seat of the Lord Jesus Christ. Do not stand between me and Jesus Christ when he commands me to defend myself. I don't feel like the state has a right to do that. It is the height of hubris to do such a thing. And so I'm asking you to grant me my God-given rights to defend my family and my friends in any manner that I can afford to do so. And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay. Members, any questions? Thank you both for being here. Chair calls Kelly Cook, James Dickey, and Jim Phipps. And the next three will be Andrea, is that Bronner or Bauer? Brommer? I'm sorry? Brower. Gotta work on the M's there. Chris McGinty and Lola Estes. And Kelly Cook,
Yes. You ready for me?
please state
Okay.
your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against.
My name is Kelly Cook, and I'm speaking on behalf of Texas Campaign for Liberty and myself. I reside in HD 16, Representative Will Metcalf's district, and I am here to speak in favor of HB 375. The time has come to restore gun rights in Texas by passing constitutional carry legislation. Constitutional carry meaning that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon. Requiring law-abiding citizens to ask for a government permission before they can exercise their constitutional right to bear arms is a clear violation of that right. We refer to this as gun rights, not gun privileges for the state to grant and profit from. I served as a delegate to the Republican Convention for several years. Delegates overwhelmingly adopted constitutional carry as a single legislative priority in the 2014 platform. Also in the top 5 priorities of the 2016 platform. The delegates collectively asked for a constitutional carry bill, one that allows people that can legally buy a gun to be able to legally carry that same gun without a government permission slip. Real-life experience and extensive research both clearly demonstrate that restricting the right to bear arms in self-defense only encourages violent crime. Fortunately, in Texas, carrying long arms without a government permission slip was never criminalized. But walking around with a shotgun or a rifle can be a little cumbersome and inconvenient, and sometimes dangerous when done on the wrong side of the street. I look forward to a time when every law-abiding Texas citizen will be allowed the freedom to carry a handgun free of charge and infringements to protect themselves and their families. I feel like this is especially important for women. I want to thank Representative Jonathan Stickland, who has led the charge on this issue since last session, and all the other co-sponsors and sponsors who see this as the reasonable demand that it is. I hope you will join our effort to make Texas a safer state by passing a constitutional carry bill this session. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Metcalf.
Thank you for being here today.
Sure. Do you have any questions for me?
Are there any other questions, members? For
I'm just
anybody
trying
else?
to kill time. It seems like we have an awkward moment.
Oh, no, you're fine. The chair calls the chair calls James Dickey. Mr. Dickey, will you lay out your name, who you here represent, and your position on the bill, please?
My name is James Dickey. I'm here personally and as chairman of the Travis County Republican Party, speaking in favor of House Bill 375. I am not currently licensed to carry in Texas, and that has nothing to do with my opinion or feeling about guns. It actually has to do with my opinion and feeling about licensing. And like the 95% of the 8,400 delegates to the Texas Republican Convention last summer who voted to ask you all as part of our official platform to please acknowledge our constitutional rights to carry without state permission, I'm here to ask you to do the same. Thanks.
Members, are there any questions? Mr. Dickey? No? Chair calls Mr. Jim Phipps. Mr. Phipps, same drill, please. Your name, who you represent,
Got it.
your position on the bill.
I'm Jim Phipps. I am for the bill, and I represent myself, and I have the honor of being in Representative Hinojosa's district, and I'm very proud of the work she's done for the district. One thing I mentioned to her, some things we'll agree with, some things we won't, but we respect each other tremendously. A couple of things have been brought up, and I don't want to repeat what's said. One, it's been mentioned about 18-year-olds, about too immature to own a weapon. It came out with campus carry. I was an infantry company commander with 18-year-olds in combat. They did well. And I was a leader. So let's get past that thought. The other thing that came up, they says, license to carry gets extensive training. Quite frankly, it's minimal training. And that training is basically ineffective because my training in the military can be measured in thousands of hours from pistols to tanks. And I can tell you for a fact, I know my business. I think this is a right, and I think all of you have sworn to support and defend the Constitution of the state and the United States government, and I would ask that you consider it as something not a privilege, but a right for us. And I believe it very strongly. So if you have any questions, please, I'm open.
Thank you, Mr. Phipps. Members, any questions of Mr. Phipps? No. The chair calls. Chair calls up Andrea Brower, Chris McGinty, and Lola Estes, please. And maybe so I only have to say this. So who do we have right now? We have everybody up here. Okay. Everybody, name, rank, and serial number. Your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill when it's your time to testify. Okay. Ms. Brower, please.
Hi, I'm Andrea Brower. I'm the Executive Director of Texas Gun Sense. I'm here to testify against HB 375. It's interesting listening to all the arguments for this bill today, and we've been hearing about we take objection to the word constitutional carry. And the way I just thought about it is, we already have constitutional carry, and the fact that our Constitution allows for the carrying of arms not to be infringed in a well-regulated environment. The Supreme Court in the Heller Amendment upholds that. So we are complying with the Constitution now by giving people their right to bear arms by doing a one-page application and doing training, which is in the best safety of everybody. So it's kind of puzzling when I hear people saying we need to restore our rights when we already have our rights now, very strong rights in the state of Texas. I think it's a very dangerous proposition to even imply that we need this bill in order to make Texans safer. This should not be a public safety strategy for the state of Texas to say that more armed people on the streets will help take care of bad guys. The regular person on the street carrying a gun is not a police officer, is not a trained officer, and we do not want to encourage that kind of behavior for people to take the law into their own hands. It's dangerous and it's confusing for law enforcement. There's also no evidence that this policy would make us safer. In fact, there are many states, there is a lot of research that says states with strong gun laws have lower gun death rates. Proponents also argue that this is a God-given right. Well, we at Texas Gun Sense don't know God's position on this bill. And I'm guessing that most people in this room also don't know God's position on this bill. We're not arguing that it's good public policy. We're not arguing that this is good for the best interest of safety. We're just saying that it's inconvenient, it's my right, and I want it now without any interruption. I think I'm out of time. Did I hit my 2 minutes? Sorry. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Representative Hinojosa.
Thank you. Ms. Brower, thank you for testifying. So I keep asking this question about how people who aren't supposed to have guns get guns. Do you by any chance have that data? It sounds like we've got some testimony that they get stolen primarily.
Right. Texas has a very big gun trafficking problem. We have 18,000, this is a little bit of a side, but we have 18,000 guns stolen or lost every year. That's an ATF figure. 40% of all the crime guns in Mexico are traced back to Texas. So when I interviewed the ATF officer over the interim, he did say we have a very big gun trafficking problem in Texas. So how people get those guns is typically by private sales. The newest estimates that are up to 1 in 5 gun sales are from private sales. So those are without background checks. So allowing constitutional carry will allow people that are felons, domestic abusers, drug abusers, people that have been on the prohibited list to carry guns in public with no permit or background check. Is that really what the state of Texas wants? Is that the best public policy that we can do here?
So the figure that you have is 18,000 guns
reported lost or stolen by the ATF in 2012.
In 2012. One of my concerns about doing away with the licensing requirement is this issue of theft. And my concern has always been keeping guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have guns, not those who are legally entitled and have a constitutional right to their gun. And I've not taken an LTC course. Do you know within the requirements of the course whether giving licensees information about securing their firearms is part of the course?
Yes, it is. There is a requirement for safe storage and child access prevention. That is very important information for gun owners to have. There are 567 kids that were killed or injured in 2014, children and teens. So we really don't want to take away training. You know, passing this bill would say that training is not important for the state of Texas. And I take issue for the people that's saying, oh, every person knows training is important and we're going to get training. We have a little over 1 million licensees. We have 40% of Texas households have guns. So let's estimate maybe 10 million people have guns in Texas. So that's a fraction. The 1 million licensees are a fraction of people that sought out the license and the training. And certainly there are other avenues for training as well. But we have no evidence that says that other people go and get training on their own if not required to do so. In fact, you have people arguing today that it's too expensive, that they don't want to pay for it. So then why would they get training? If they're saying it's too, you know, and we've heard that the last few days, in reduction of the fee to $40, why would they seek out and pay for training if they're saying it's too expensive? And they shouldn't have to do it because it's their God-given right.
Representative Schaefer.
Ma'am, thank you for your testimony. You mentioned domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
Domestic violence is a big problem in this state, yes?
Yes.
What about a working mom who's single, has an abusive ex-husband, begins to act more and more violently toward her? She begins to fear for her personal safety.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes to her brother, say, hey, you know what, you've got a pistol. Would you let me carry that in my purse because I'm worried he's going to hurt me or the kids? And what you're telling that woman is no.
Absolutely not.
Wait. Go get the training. Go find a class. Find a babysitter. Take time off from work. Maybe you can afford the class. Maybe you can afford the license fee. Maybe you can afford to wait 2 months before the state of Texas gives you a permission slip to defend yourself against a man who may come and do harm to you physically and to your children. What do you say to that woman?
Okay, first of all, if a woman has a gun in her home, she's 3 times more likely to be killed by her own gun in a domestic violence situation. That is a fact. Also, I would not think that someone...
You're going to tell her that the statistics are against her? Don't
No,
protect
absolutely
yourself?
not. I'm not telling anyone. If someone wants to get a gun for their own personal safety, absolutely. And for your own home protection, you don't need to get a license to carry.
Ma'am,
If she wants to
put that in her purse...
Representative Schaefer, will you let her answer that question, please?
If she wants to get a gun, it takes 15 minutes at Cabela's to get it. She can keep it in her home where her husband is. I would not deny anybody that right to self-protection. That is a Second Amendment right.
Can she take it to the park when she takes her kids to the playground?
Certainly, we understand that. I do not think it's onerous to get an application. I also, as someone who went to a shooting range just a couple of months ago, handling a gun and try to defend yourself is not very easy when you haven't handled one before. If a woman I think anybody that gets a gun, woman or man, should have training to handle that gun.
I think you'd be surprised what a mother would do that was trying to defend herself and her kids.
I am a mother also, so I understand that position. Again, I'm not trying to limit anybody's right here. I just don't think it's onerous to ask somebody to get a license and to get training. I think it's in everybody's best interest, even that woman, to be trained how to use that gun.
Thank you, Ms. Brower. Members, any other questions? I'll remind the audience we've been doing real good up to now, but I hear a little murmuring here and there. Please keep your comments to yourself. That way we can keep having our niceties and having the hearing continue smoothly. We're doing great up to now, but if you agree or disagree with one of the witnesses, that's fine, but keep your disapproval or approval to shaking your head, but don't let any words or sound come out of your mouth, please. Thank you. Next witnesses. Oh, we have, got you. Chair calls Mr. McGinty. Same drill, Mr. McGinty.
My name's Chris McGinty. I'm for the bill, House Bill. Good.
Go ahead.
I live in a little town outside of Houston, and I carry a gun in every vehicle.
Mr. McGinty, who do you represent yourself?
Myself. I respect the laws that have been passed. I carry a gun in every vehicle. There's guns in my home, and I happen to live in a sanctuary city where the exact same police force that just sat here and said I shouldn't have a gun because it's dangerous allows criminals to run free on our streets. I'm in awe that I, as a Texas citizen born, I can get my concealed handgun permit. I don't. I've no criminal record. I'm just amazed that I don't have the right to purchase the firearm and carry it with me. I understand
the crimes and criminals, and those people need to be punished. We need to lock them up. We need to get those people out of society. But I mean, I've dealt with policemen. I've been pulled over. They never even ask if it's in my car. They never. It's a non-issue. They write me my citation for speeding one time, and that's it. And I just we've especially in Houston, we've just convoluted our laws so much. I mean, we've got a full criminal element running around, but yet I'm held to a higher standard because I'm a Texan. I'm a law-abiding Texan. And by the law, I cannot carry the gun that I can legally purchase. So, that's it. I'm for it. And Briscoe Kane is my rep, and I love him. So
thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, the next three will be Andrew Romero, Susan Nelson, and Bob Green. And, ma'am, if you would state your name, who you represent, and whether you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
Yes, my name is Lola Estes. I represent myself. I live in Austin, and I'm against the bill. Texas has reduced the class time for concealed handgun licenses and passed open carry in the last few years. In that same time frame, homicides have increased in our state. San Antonio has had a greater spike in its homicide rate than Chicago did for 2016. Looser gun laws in Texas have not reduced violent crime. In fact, the opposite has happened. I have to be honest with you. I'm frustrated by bills being put forward that take away my freedom to live safely in a gun-free environment and instead encourage gun proliferation and proponents using language that make it seem like guns are anything but killing tools that create real public and health safety issues that must be addressed by the government. They aren't safe. They kill freedom, they destroy families, they take lives in homes and workplaces across our state. Guns are incredibly dangerous. There's a reason why the Constitution allows for guns to be well regulated, and the courts have upheld that regulation. It's because guns' only purpose is to quickly and effectively kill others. A similar no-permit law passed in Missouri and increased the homicide rate. Daniel Webster, director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Policy, cut to the chase. It increased the homicide rates by 30% in Missouri during that time, but neighboring states did not suffer a similar spike in murders, and the firearm homicide rate dropped nationally during the same time. If this is permitless carry, where is the well-regulated part of the Second Amendment going to happen?
Okay, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, y'all are doing great. We're about a third of the way through the witnesses. Thank you all for being here today. Let me go ahead and call up Andrew Romero, Susan Nelson, and Bob Green. And just a little reminder that if someone has already said basically the same things you're going to say, and you would prefer not to testify, just come up and let us know, and we'll show you as we'll have you placed in the record as being for or against the bill, whichever you preferred. We'll have in the record who you represented, and your position will be noted for the record. So you don't have to testify if you've already heard other people say the same thing. Now, that said, if you want to testify, we'll stay forever and hear you today. So we want to let everyone who speak that wants to speak. But again, if you don't feel like you need to, just let us know. You can either tell me that when I call your name, that you no longer need to testify, or you can come up before then and tell the clerk, and she'll go ahead and make us aware of that. Let me see, we called, who didn't come up? We called Andrew Romero, Susan Nelson, and Bob Green. Okay. Ms. Nelson, you would tell us your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Frances Schenken, but I'm testifying for Susan Nelson, who had to leave.
Okay.
Is that allowed?
I need to stop you right there. I'll be happy to let you testify, but I have to get you to step down right now.
Okay.
And go ahead and go out to the kiosk and register.
I am registered individually myself, and
Okay.
she was also registered.
All right. What is your name again?
Frances Schenken.
Okay.
We registered at about the same time.
All right.
I did
Frances.
not register to testify.
Okay.
It's
let us.
SCHENKKAN.
I can't let you testify for somebody else. I will go ahead and let us find you so I get it's marked. You are already shown here today representing Texas Gun Sense and yourself, and that you were registered to against HB 375, but that you did not wish to testify.
Correct.
And do you want to go ahead and testify?
May I read her testimony as my own?
We'll just pretend it's yours.
Okay.
So you may,
Thank you.
with your permission, we're going to change it to that you do want to testify. And we're going to show Susan Nelson as having registered, representing herself and against HB 375, but not wishing to testify.
Thank you for your courtesy. I appreciate it.
Certainly. Please proceed again, and now state your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against.
My name is Frances Schenken. I am on the board of Texas Gun Sense, and I'm against House Bill 375. I am a native Texan. I have 3 brothers and 1 sister who are all members of the National Rifle Association. They own handguns and other guns and have their license to carry. I am not anti-Second Amendment. I do not oppose having the right to carry a gun openly or otherwise. However, after being shot point blank in the back of the head, spending weeks in a coma, months in rehab, relearning the basics of adult living, and then years picking up the pieces of my life, I do understand the need to feel safe. Some of those supporting House Bill 375 say it is their right to have a gun. I agree to some extent, but it is also my right to feel safe by knowing the person carrying a gun in my neighborhood, down the street, at the store, at the very least that that person has had a background check, has been trained on how to use the gun and how to store it, and that it is registered. We require our police and our military to be trained with firearms. We know which guns they have been given that are distributed to them. We should, for their safety and for my own safety, do the same for a person having a gun. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Bob Green. I am here today representing myself and hopefully a lot of other legal gun owners throughout the state. I am a Republican Party precinct chair here in town. I was at the last state convention in which we did deem this a priority.
And you're testifying on for?
I was saying for this 375. I'd initially like to thank Representative Strickland for carrying this piece of legislation because we feel it's very important. That in a sense, we are not authorized to remove rights. We are not authorized to remove the rights that are set down in the United States Constitution. If someone wants to see my permit, I'll reach into my pocket and pull out my pocket Constitution and say, here it is. I shouldn't have to go beyond that. We all have a right to feel safe, but we can't do that. I mean, even Ben Franklin said, you know, those of us who would give up our rights for any security deserve neither. And I think that's where we stand in a piece of legislation. We've tried to do this, and I would also say that my representative is here today, Ms. Hinojosa. I realize that she and I probably have different views on this, but I thank her for being here, and I thank for her thoughtful questions. I would say to her is that she's asked the question several times about where criminals get guns. Well, they commit a crime to get one. They either steal it, they buy it off the street out of somebody's trunk, but they then commit a crime. They don't care about the laws. That's why they call them criminals. So, but what I'd like to say is I would really like to ask this committee to review this bill favorably, pass it out of committee to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you very much. Chair calls Josh. Andrew Romero, who I called up a moment ago, had shown he wished to testify, is not here, so he will be shown as not wishing to testify. that he was here today representing Austin Police Association and that he was against HB 375. Chair calls Joshua Anderson, Robert Harris, and Michael Cargill. Welcome back.
Yes, sir.
Joshua Anderson, Robert Harris, and Michael Cargill. How about, well, let's...
They're afraid of me.
Must be it, Mr. Ant. Go ahead, state your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
My name is Michael Cargill. I'm the Executive Director for Texas for Accountable Government. I'm speaking for Texas for Accountable Government, and I'm speaking for HB 375. I'm also speaking for the Texas Log Cabin Republicans. I'm on the chair for that organization as well. I'm speaking for that organization as well. And I'm speaking for Central Texas Gun Works as the owner. I'm also an LTC instructor.
Let me back you up just a little bit. You only registered for Texans for Accountable Government and yourself.
All right, so we'll stick with Texas for Accountable Government and the owner of Central Texas Gun Works.
That works.
That'll work?
Yeah.
All right, sir. And I'm speaking for the bill, HB 375. With Texas for Accountable Government, we have an organization of over 2,000 people, and we actually support this bill 100%. Also, as the owner of Central Texas Gun Works, with a email list of over 40,000 people, we support this bill 100%. Also, as the board for Log Cabin Republicans, we unanimously support HB 375. My parents, this past summer, were victims of a home invasion where 3 guys spent actually 45 minutes to an hour trying to break into my parents' home. And my parents, at 3 o'clock in the morning, woke up and had to defend themselves. My parents, what happened was this guy actually grabbed the ladder that he broke into my parents' shed, took out of the shed, laid that ladder against the house, and crawled into the second floor of the home. And my parents had to stop him as he was crawling through the master bathroom window. It doesn't take a lot of training. It takes someone who wants to defend themselves, a right to stop those individuals from trying to kill them. That person, what he wanted to do, he wanted to kill my parents and then go downstairs and let those other 2 guys inside the home so they can rob my parents. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
And you, sir, are?
I am Mr. Joshua Anderson.
Okay, would you please tell us who you represent and if you're testifying on, for, or
I
against?
represent myself, and I'm testifying for HB 375. Last week when I decided to come down here and testify for the bill, I did a word study on the Second Amendment. A few words specifically. The term well-regulated, back when the Constitution was written, meant a machine or a group of people that worked well with each other. The militia was a group of civilians that would be called in an emergency to supplement the regular military. And of course, we know what the right to bear arms means. We have the right to carry our arms. Now, that being said, some of our fine Texans here that do not wish to support this bill will not be able to say that there's any gun control measure that has prevented a mass killing. As a matter of fact, most of our mass killings have happened in gun-free zones. You don't hear of a mass killing happening at a gun store or at a gun range. So I do believe that we would be safer if we had unlicensed carry. And with that, I will end my comments.
Thank you both for being here today. I called Robert Harris. He'll be shown not wishing to testify, representing himself today and being for HB 375. Chair calls Diana Earl, Diana Ramirez, and Bill Eastland. Diana Earl, Diana Ramirez, and Bill Eastland, if you'd please come up. All right, and your name again, ma'am? Diana Earl. Thank you. So, Ms. Earl, you wish to be shown not wishing to testify, but being here on behalf of yourself and Moms Demand Action and being against HB 375?
Correct.
We'll show that in the record. Thank you. Diana Ramirez?
Yes.
And Bill Eastland. Mr. Eastland, are you here? Yes. Great. Ms. Ramirez, why don't we start with you? If you would state your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
My name's Diana Ramirez. I am for HB 375. I represent myself, my husband, my family. I'm a member of most of the gun groups in the state.
Now,
So-
you listed that you were representing Texas Firearms Freedom and Lone Star Gun Rights.
Yes, I'm a member of those groups, and
Thank you.
OCT and pretty much all of them.
Okay.
I
But you're
am
representing those today.
Yeah. I am a mother of 3 who 20 years ago, I was going to say other things, but people have already said them, so I'm going to put out my story. 20 years ago, my husband went out, got a gun, because we were moving into a new neighborhood. There was construction all over the place. I was by myself with 3 kids, one of them a baby. Took me to the gun range. He taught me how to use that revolver, single action. Took me a couple of times, and he gave it to me, and he said, while I'm gone, half the time, your responsibility is to take care of the kids and yourself and this house. Back then, I had no license. I didn't need a license or a lot of training. I just needed to know what I needed to do, and that's what I did. I now have a license. I support keeping the license for reciprocity, but I also support the right of people not having to pay a fee to defend themselves. Women that are low income, that live in bad neighborhoods, need to be able to do what I did back then without a license, and not just in their house, but out there where they're walking their kids or their dogs or whatever. And I'm out of time, so I'm going to leave it there.
That's very good. Thank you. Sir, your name is?
Robert Harris. I was in the overflow room. It took me a minute to get here. My apologies.
And we called you, I guess, a couple back. Is that correct? All right. Hang loose just a second. We'll pull you back up.
Sure.
And ladies and gentlemen, the next group is Joshua Keene, Joseph Walker, and Elizabeth Dianovich. Joshua Keene, Joseph Walker, and Elizabeth Dianovich. And Mr. Eastland, if you would tell us your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. My name is Bill Eastland. I'm here on my own behalf. I am speaking in favor of House Bill 375. I am a former member of the Republican State Executive Committee. I'm not here speaking on behalf of the Republican Party, but I have been a very active member in the party my entire adult life. At our state convention in 2016, after we were frustrated by not getting constitutional carry in the previous session of the legislature, we passed it as our #1 legislative priority. Also in our platform, and by the way, that legislative priority states pass constitutional carry while maintaining licensing as optional for reciprocity purposes, which is pretty much what House Bill 375 does. The platform plank says we strongly oppose all laws that infringe on the right to bear arms. We oppose the monitoring of gun ownership, taxation, and regulation of guns, ammunition, and gun magazines. We collectively urge the legislature to pass constitutional carry legislation whereby law-abiding citizens that possess firearms can legally exercise their God-given right to carry that firearm as well. We call for the elimination of all gun-free zones. Most of that is absolutely incorporated in House Bill 375, and you will make us in the convention happy. I believe that if you aren't able to pass it this session, we'll be asking for it again in 2017. Am I out of time? Almost. Vermont carry has been mentioned. All 13 states basically had what we think of as constitutional carry. It was only in the 19th century did this start to restrict. What we want to go back to is what the original understanding of the founders and the framers was in the beginning, and it was reflected in the state laws at that time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sir, if you let me see Robert Harris, if you would, we've got you back up on the screen, so if you would
Yes,
state
sir.
your name.
My name's Robert Harris, and I'm here in favor of it.
And are you representing yourself, or?
I'm representing myself, and I'd kind of like to speak on behalf, although I can't speak for them, the oil and gas workers in the state of Texas.
All right, you just registered for yourself.
But this is my opinion, yes, sir.
Thank you. And you're testifying on, for, or against?
For.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. 8 years ago, I've worked in the oil and gas industry for about 15 years. 8 years ago, I was working in West Texas, Hobbs, New Mexico to be exact. I'm driving back from Hobbs, New Mexico to Texas, and I had a blowout inside Dooley on a pickup truck right on the Texas-New Mexico border. I was not aware that that was one of the crime routes for criminal, let me say this specifically, criminal illegal aliens coming into the country. They come up the Texas-New Mexico border, and if the Texas police or law enforcement starts chasing them, they jump into New Mexico, and then if the New Mexico police start chasing them, they jump back into Texas. Well, when I had my blowout, I'd worked 16 hours that day. I was wore out, and I'm the guy that usually gets out and changes somebody's tire or helps them change their tire, and I changed my own. But that day I decided to call roadside assistance. It was truly a blessing that I did that. I had three illegal aliens come up the border. They came up to my truck. One stood behind my truck, one stood on the passenger side, one stood on the driver's side and started yelling at me in Spanish and pointing at the ground. I'm a military veteran. I can tell people's body posture and what they're doing. They were trying to get me out of the vehicle to do something bad. Luckily, I had a firearm in the vehicle with me, and I just purchased it. My wife had just purchased it for me. Normally, I was the guy that when my wife bought me a firearm, I'm a big hunter, I would take it home and lock it in the gun safe, and it wouldn't come out again until hunting season. After that event in my life 8 years ago, I carry now. And I carry for a reason, because I learned it only takes one time. It only takes one time for you not to have that firearm on you. And I urge this committee to take that into consideration, because we've got thousands of people working around the state in remote areas, especially when you start getting to western Texas. We always think about the inner cities and the gun problems there and the problems we have in inner cities. Thank you, sir. But please take this into consideration making your decision on this bill and support HB 375. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I don't think there's any questions, so thank you.
Okay.
And ladies and gentlemen, if I could, you're dismissed. Thank you. You can go ahead and sit down. And if you would, and I know it gets a little confusing, but two things. One, wait till I call your name again to come back up. It's okay. It's fine. And if you would, stay here just in case any of the members do have questions until all three are finished testifying. And then if there's no questions, go ahead and step down, because if there is a question, I want to make sure that you get the opportunity to respond to it. So, Chair calls Joshua Keene, Joseph Walker, and Elizabeth Dianovich. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stop you mid-stride there. We have the next. Let's start with you, ma'am. If you'd please tell us your name and
Elizabeth Dianovich.
And who you represent today.
Myself.
And are you testifying on, for, or against HB 375?
I'm for House Bill 375.
Thank you. Please.
And for myself. I'm sorry, I don't belong to any organization or anything.
Okay.
Do I have to start?
No, ma'am. You can just tell us what you wanted to tell us.
Okay. I have a short testimony of my life. I came years ago from a former communist country, from Eastern Europe, and I was born there in Eastern Europe. And during 1944, I have to testify that the communists came in power and confiscated all the guns, and the country became a police state. So all the guns forcefully were taken. So unfortunately, my father was interrogated, and so I lived under communist oppression for many years. But during 1974, I was already in the States I remember that in New York I became a U.S. citizen. I gave allegiance to the United States of America under the republic which we stand. 1976 in New York, I was living in New York, then I got married for a Texan who is a second generation Joe Dianovich, and came to Austin, Texas, so I'm about resident of Texas for 41 years, since 1976. So I'm giving my short testimony.
Ma'am, we have Chairman Navarez would like to ask you a question.
Can I finish?
Well, let me ask you a question, though, ma'am. Can you continue your story, please? That's
My story?
That's my question. Can you continue, please?
Well, that's I have only 2 minutes, so I want
I know
to,
that your time ran out, and that's why I'm asking you a question so you can continue, please. Trying to help
what,
you.
what I have to continue. I mean, it's a
Giving
story.
you an extension.
It's not a story; it's a testimony. So I can tell stories. I know I heard a lot of stories here, but my story, nobody has it. So that's why I'm just saying it's not a story; it's a testimony of my life. So my father was interrogated in a communist country. I have lots of neighbors here, lots of Texans. Nobody understands anything because if nobody walked in my shoes, they don't understand nothing. So that's all I can say.
All right. Jenna?
Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Okay. And I am for this bill because I love the state of Texas. These are my finishing touches. And I hope that they pass this bill. You know, it's for the, not to have tyranny in Texas. I don't want that. I want a free Texas, you know. And I hope the rest of the country realizes that too.
Where in Eastern Europe were you from?
I came from Bulgaria.
Okay, good. Thank you. Joseph Walker. Mr. Walker, please state your name, who you are. Ma'am, would you mind waiting until, just in case some of the others have some questions, please.
Okay.
Would you state your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375?
My name is Joseph Walker. I'm testifying for, and I represent myself. Go.
Yes, please.
I was made a political prisoner by the state of Texas for fighting for my constitutional rights against tyranny and political oppression. We will get our rights back because of 2 reasons. 1, we are tired of paying the state for an exemption to a law that violates our rights. And 2, the tide has changed, and every day more and more people are asking the same questions. That being, 1, how much does the state make off of selling we the people back our rights? And 2, where does the money go? As a parting statement, taxation is theft, and I won't support any law enforcement fighting against my rights.
Thank you. Joshua King, please state your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375.
I'm Joshua King. I represent myself, and I'm here today to testify for HB 375. The reason I support this bill is because I am a firm believer in the Second Amendment and all that it stands for. Besides this, I also firmly believe that making the license to carry optional will encourage more law-abiding citizens to arm themselves, seek the proper training, and carry it with them for protection of themselves, their families, their fellow Texans, and their property. I also support this bill because no citizen should be forced to pay a tax and seek a permission slip from their government to exercise a civil right off of their private property. Constitutional carry will not stop citizens from taking classes and getting the training to operate a firearm, nor will it keep them from being able to voluntarily apply for a license to carry. Citizens will be eager to seek training from private citizens who specialize in providing the best training for weapons safety, maintenance, and employment. The right to bear arms is a right, not a privilege. We might not be the first state to enact constitutional carry, but if we fail to do so this session, we will fall even further behind on the issue, an issue we should be leading. Please pass HB 375 so our great state can live up to our reputation. That's it.
Good. Thank you all very much. Chair calls, I believe it's Julie Gothines. Did I get close on that? Raul Camacho and Cheryl Walker. And the next three after this will be Leland Raina, Megan Bates, and Matthew, is that an L or a J? L, sorry. Walbeck. Let's see, let's start with Ms. Grothius.
Okay.
Please state your name, who you represent, and testifying on, for, or against.
Sure. My name is Julie Grothius. I'm a volunteer with the Texas chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, and I'm here to speak against House Bill 375. Moms Demand is a grassroots movement of American moms fighting for public safety measures that respect the Second Amendment while protecting us from gun violence. Moms Demand is part of Everytown for Gun Safety, which is the largest gun violence prevention organization in the country with more than 3.5 million members. House Bill 375 would completely eliminate the requirement that a Texas resident require a permit to carry a loaded handgun in public, either openly or concealed. That means that existing public safety protections, such as criminal background check and live fire training, would be eliminated. The bill also would reduce the age of those able to carry handguns in public to 18, which has been discussed. This is a particular concern to me because I'm the mother of 2 college-age kids. Luckily, my kids attend Rice University and Georgia Tech. Both currently prohibit guns on campus. My 3rd child, however, plans to attend Texas State University in the fall, and the prospect of any college student without required training or a background check being able to carry a handgun into a dorm or a classroom or a party is terrifying to me. We all know that college is a time of experimentation with all sorts of behavior, and alcohol use is high up there on that list. Between alcohol use, high-pressure environments, and suicide risks, guns and college students just don't mix. When campus carry was justified at the Texas legislature in 2015, our lawmakers told us not to worry, that only a tiny fraction of college students, those 21 and older, would be able to carry guns. Well, with House Bill 375, that changes. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Camacho? I'm sorry we've only got 2 mics there.
That's okay. That's okay. Good afternoon. My name is Raul Camacho. I'm a licensed peace officer, fireman instructor, and the owner of Safety Measures. How you call it? 8 years or so. Been in law enforcement.
And are you testifying?
I'm going to be testifying against it.
All right.
375.
All right, and you're representing yourself.
Yes, sir. And Safety Measures. Yes, sir. So the 8 years I've been licensed peace officer. 2 times I had to draw my gun on someone. 2 times it was off duty. So 4 times total. My staff and I exercise our Second Amendment rights responsibly, and we hope others do the same. I'm here to oppose House Bill 375 because it's taken away much-needed education and training standards for citizens that want to carry. Today, you're going to hear a lot of rhetoric that people have a right to bear arms and that their rights should not be infringed. Their belief and ideology that any right is unrestricted is totally at odds with history, the law, and reality. Nearly every idea in the Bill of Rights comes with restrictions, limitations, and some sort of regulation. The right to bear arms is no different. You're also going to hear rhetoric that constitutional carry will lower crimes. We passed out a packet for you guys to review. You'll see some data of each state that shows different. Overall crime has gone down throughout the nation, but violent crimes such as murder and aggravated assault have gone up in many states, including several states that practice constitutional carry, such as Arizona and Alaska, Montana, and a couple other states. The License to Carry program has played a huge role educating people about laws relating to the use of force, proper storage, firearm safety, correcting bad habits, and much more. No one in this building would want a police officer to carry a gun who has not gone through mandatory training. The standards should be the same for those who want to carry in our streets. Carrying a gun on a daily basis is a lifestyle that requires skills, discipline, continuous training, and a proper mindset. I rest my case.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Cheryl Walker?
Yes, sir.
Please state
My name is Cheryl Walker. I'm a mother, a grandmother. I used to be a wife until my husband died 2 years ago.
Okay. Are you representing yourself?
I'm representing myself.
And you're testifying on, for, or against?
For
HB 375.
375.
Thank you.
Okay. My husband died, like I said. I went to the class. I paid my money to go to the class. I paid my money to get a gun. I paid my money to get you guys to check out my FBI report or whatever, my fingerprints. I paid all this money to get my right to carry a gun. Now, I have a right to protect myself. This gentleman has a right to protect himself. Now, just because he's a police officer and I'm not, doesn't mean that a thug can't stick a gun in my face just like he can his. I want the same right. That's all I got to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you all three for being here. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Hinojosa.
Yes, I actually have a question for Mr. Camacho. Mr. Camacho, in your classes that you teach, you mentioned that you teach safe storage.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the purpose of that?
We live in a world where Darwinism is real and alive. We got folks out there, man, that need to be reminded that safe storage is a behavior. It's a learned attitude, and so we have a lot of accidental deaths, unfortunately, here throughout our state and also throughout the country, and this is why we teach that.
Do you teach? So, what is safe storage?
Teaching people how to secure their firearms. It's not about hiding your firearms. It's about securing your firearms. How to be responsible with that firearm when it's not being used.
Is like in a safe?
Safe storage. They have safes. They have storage devices, furniture, hidden wall compartments, etc.
So, is part of the purpose of the safe storage lesson that you teach to keep guns from the hands of people who shouldn't get them?
There's usually about 4 different reasons why you want to have safe storage practices. Is one, keep the gun from being fired. The second one is keep it away from children or people who are not authorized to use that firearm. The other one is to maintain it, keep it from being damaged, and the other part is to again, not let bad guys or let's say people steal your firearms.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ladies and gentlemen, and thank you.
Thank you, sir.
If y'all want to go ahead and step down, it'll be fine. Just so everybody can kind of know what we're looking at time-wise, we've had 323 people register today for this bill. We haven't gotten to 1911 yet. We've had 83 register they wish to testify, and 42 remain. So we're just right at the halfway mark in testifying on this bill. And people continue to register. Again, I'll say this, we're delighted to hear anybody who wants to testify, but if you have already heard people say what you would say, you're going to be in the record showing that you are for or against, and that's a permanent part of the record that the members will have and that will also be available to those on the floor. So if you really don't need to come up and say it, feel free not to. If you want to, we certainly want to hear from you. But I can tell you at the rate we're going, we're not going to get to 1911 until 10 o'clock or so. And if people continue to spin up and sign up, we'll be here a lot after that. So I'm considering closing the registration process, but I really don't want to do that. So if anybody's really wanting to testify, go sign up very soon. Because I'm probably at some point just going to be forced by time restrictions to go ahead and close that out. So with that, Chair calls Leland Raina, Megan Bates, and Matthew Walbeck. And on deck for the next 3 is John Greer, Whitney Peak, and Matthew Walbeck. Oh, we've got you twice there. Sorry. You only have to come up once. And, sir, you are?
My name is Leland Raina.
Okay. And, ma'am, you're Megan Bates, I guess?
Yes, sir.
All right. Why don't we start with you, ma'am? State your name, who you represent, are you testifying on, for, or against HB 375?
My name is Megan Bates, and I am for HB 375. And I represent myself. I have a personal story that I'd like to share with y'all.
Please.
A couple years ago, I attended a meeting and it got out after dark. I was waiting for my friend in an unlit parking lot because he got delayed visiting with friends. On my way to the car, while walking alone, I heard shuffling feet behind me. I looked back and saw that I was being followed. A chill came over me and I felt I was not going home to my daughters. Without hesitating, I dashed to the other parking lot that had lights and called my friend. I made it home safely to tuck my girls in, but I felt vulnerable knowing I can't outmuscle a man in hand-to-hand combat. I would not have been nearly as scared if I would have been armed. Since then, I have obtained a license and carry every time I'm out for my protection as well as my children's. I never want to feel that vulnerable again. What upsets me was that I had to pay a tax for an exemption to a law to defend myself. I will not stop fighting to restore gun rights until Texas reinstates the rights it has stolen from me. In closing, I want to stress the importance of being able to defend not only myself, but the lives of my children as well without having to apply for a government-issued permission slip. I want to thank Representative King for holding a hearing on constitutional carry, and also thank Jonathan Stickland for leading the charge on making Texas a safer place for our children to live.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Rainey, please state your name, who you represent, and if you're testifying on, for, or against HB 375. And again, the next three on deck are going to be John Greer, Whitney Peak, and Matthew Stringer. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Leland Reyna. I represent Safety Measures, a firearm training facility. I also represent myself, and I am against House Bill 375. In the military, we had a saying that complacency kills. And it does, not just on combat deployments, but also in training. It is also the responsibility of the command of the issue of complacency. This bill would take away the ability of the state to effectively enforce a measure to counter complacency. Funny thing about complacency on deployment or within command, it rarely happens suddenly and is usually recognized only after a loss of life or at the end of a deployment. The consequences of complacency if House Bill 375 is passed will not show themselves immediately, but most likely and tragically only after mishaps. This is not a battlefield. We don't have to draw a line in the sand. This is politics, and I believe the great state of Texas has reached the compromise needed, and that best suits this state of Texas. Thank you to the committee for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Matthew Walbeck was called as constable in Kleberg County, Precinct 1, and was representing himself. It will be shown that he did not testify, but was for HB 375. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Chair calls John Greer, Whitney Peak, and Matthew Stringer. And next up, after this, will be Ben Song, Reed King, and Joe Palmer. John Greer, Whitney Peak, and Matthew Stringer. You, sir, are?
They're in the other room.
All right. We'll go ahead and get started with that. You, sir, are?
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is John Greer. I'm the Republican Precinct Chair for the 2nd Precinct in Collin County in the 3rd Congressional District. I'm here today to testify in favor of House Bill 375.
Okay, and you're representing yourself?
I'm representing myself,
All right.
yes.
Thank you.
The Second Amendment is clearly written as to be understandable by all that read it, and it states that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Not the militia. The people are the militia. There are no ifs, ands, or buts in our Constitution. There are no limitations placed on the word people nor on the word arms. So one can reasonably ascertain that all of the people have an unrestricted right to keep and bear whatever arms he or she deems necessary to protect themselves, their family, and their nation. Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution, otherwise known as the Supremacy Clause, states, "This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. Article 1, Section 23 of the Texas Constitution states that the legislature shall have the power by law to regulate the wearing of arms with a view to prevent crime. I wish somebody would explain to me where the state of Texas derives its authority to override the supreme law of the land in regard to stripping Americans of their protected rights. The state of Texas has no authority to take away secured rights of the people, license them, and sell those rights back. Murdoch versus Pennsylvania clearly states no state may convert a secured right into a privilege and issue a license for it. And Shuttlesworth versus Birmingham states that if they do convert your right into a privilege and issue a license, you can ignore the license and fee and engage in that right with impunity. To answer your question, ma'am, the guns, one way our government has been sending guns or selling guns.
I'm going to need to go ahead and stop you. Your time is up.
Okay.
But we thank you very much for being here today.
Okay. Thank you so much.
We called Whitney Peak and Matthew Stringer. They'll be shown not testifying. Mr. Whitney Peak was representing herself, and she wished to be shown against HB3 or registered against HB 375. Matthew Stringer, representing himself, registered for HB 375, but will be shown not testifying. Chair calls Ben Song, Reed King, and Joe Palmer. Next up on deck will be Corey Watkins, William Clem, and Galen George. Corey Watkins, William Clem, and Galen George. And Mr. Song, why don't we start with you?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Ben Song from Arlington, Texas, and I am giving testimony for House Bill 357.
And are you representing
375,
yourself?
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Are you representing yourself?
Yes, I'm representing myself.
Okay. Please proceed.
Well, sir, I'm deeply disappointed. I will be unable to give the testimony that I wanted because I have to do some kind of basic legal fact-checking with regard to this bill in relation to campus carry. It was stated that this bill will lower the age to carry from 21 to 18. I can tell you I have had recent experience with this matter. I'm 24 years old. This is incorrect. There are two main barriers to carrying on campus right now. The first one is Texas law, which states you must be 21 to have a license to carry, except for military, which I was. I was a military reservist going to college. The much larger barrier is that it is illegal for a federal firearms licensed dealer to sell a handgun to anyone under 21. Now, anyone engaged in the manufacture, import, or dealing in firearms must have an FFL from the ATF. So that's every gun store, every gun show dealer, and every pawn shop. It is virtually impossible to purchase a handgun under 21 if you have someone else do it for you. That is a straw man purchase. That's also a felony. So in conclusion, you can carry at 18. However, the larger barrier in your inability to purchase makes it virtually impossible. You can carry at 18 right now.
Okay, thank you. Reed King?
Yes. I'm Reed King. I'm from Denton, Texas, and I'm representing myself. The question before this committee is one of... I'm testifying for House Bill 375. The question before this committee is one of awful moment to the state. For my own part, I consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery, and in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of the debate. It is only in this way that we can hope to arrive at truth and fulfill the great responsibility which we hold to God and our state. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time through fear of giving offense, I should consider myself as guilty of treason toward my state and of an act of disloyalty toward the majesty of heaven which I revere above all earthly kings. Sir, we have been trying this for the last 20 years. Have we anything new to offer upon this subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up to every light of which it is capable, but it has been all in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? What terms shall we find which we have not already been exhausted? Let us not, I beseech you, sir, deceive ourselves. Sir, we have done everything that could be done. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the legislature. Our petitions have been slighted, our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult, our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt. If we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve inviolate those inestimable rights for which we have so long been contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged and which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest shall be obtained, we must stop ignoring the unalienable rights of the people. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable a change to the status quo, but when shall we be stronger? Will it be next session or the next? It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, patience, patience, but there's no patience left. Our other states are already there. Why stand we idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death.
Thank you. Heard that before. Joe Palmer.
Joe Palmer, representing Self, speaking in favor of 375.
Thank you.
Your admonition is well received to cut out everything that's already been said before. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Members, can it be said that people have their rights when these rights are dispensed from one person to another, from one group of people to another? I asked in the overflow room, have any of the cited increases in crime in Missouri been attributed to the lessening of regulation on the possession or carrying of guns there? So I decided to research it a little bit. I found an article that quotes the economist John R. Lott, who is a leading expert on gun violence statistics, refuted a Johns Hopkins study that claims that repeal of Missouri's universal background checks law is the cause of an increase in murder rates in an exclusive Guns and Patriots interview. There is a lot of arbitrary cherry-picking of the data, said Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, a research and education organization that studies the relationship between laws regulating the ownership or use of guns, crime, and public safety. Other research that looked at all the states, not just one, comes to a different conclusion. Baltimore-based Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health conducted a study that claims Missouri's murder rate increased by 16% after the state legislature in 2007 repealed its universal background check law, which required all handgun purchasers to undergo a background check at the auspices of local law enforcement. The Johns Hopkins study, which is expected to be published this month in the Journal of Urban Health, looks at the time period between 2008 and 12 after the background checks law was repealed, instead of examining the change in crime rates to include before the law was enacted in 1981. In a 5-year period after the law was enacted, the murder rate went up as faster in Missouri than it did other states, but in the 5-year period before the law was enacted, the murder rate was going up even faster, said Lott. Missouri was on an ominous path before the law was ended. And in conclusion, regarding the argument that since law enforcement officers undergo mandatory training, that private individuals must also, some of the reasons that law enforcement personnel undergo extensive and rigorous training are that they have a dangerous job. It is statistically more dangerous experience than that of an individual going to the store or what have you. Also, the training of law enforcement personnel serves to mitigate potential lawsuits from wrongful discharge of firearms, etc. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Members, thank you all for being here today.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, let me make a comment, if I may. I've heard on more than one occasion the word or the comparison between this and slavery. We all live by laws in the United States. A slave would not have the opportunity of coming and protesting his ideology in front of this body. A slave couldn't choose when and where to go. A slave could not choose how to think. A slave couldn't do anything of the nature by which you're telling me because you simply couldn't carry a gun. The freedom and the right. Slaves didn't have freedoms nor rights. So I take it as insult when you're trying to compare your constitutional right to carry a gun to involuntary slavehood, where men and women were raped by a slave owner who had the right to carry a gun when an individual didn't. So I'm just saying, I would prefer, I can't tell anybody what to do, everybody has their own opinions, to limit your comparison to a law that we all have to live by. You and I both, no matter what our skin color is. So I would advise, let's
there a
stop
question?
comparing.
Is there a question?
Let's stop comparing slavery to constitutional carry.